You're Australian, so I have to ask you about that. But and then I was like, yeah, he was waiting for what was up with his Billabong. And I was like, I used to have shirts that said Billabong on them. What was the deal with that? Was it surfwear? What the heck was it? You know, because like I remember it being so cool. And like I had a Billabong t-shirt and thought I was the coolest kid in the 6th grade, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a huge thing here too. They, yeah, it was definitely surfwear. So the surfy culture here was huge, and like from the 70s all the way through till, well, I guess they're kind of still around, but yeah, like 70s to 90s, that was a massive thing. Like I did surf lifesaving as a kid, and like that was the thing that you did. Like you went to the beach every weekend and like learned how to read the surf and all that sort of stuff, and wore, yeah, like surfwear. And yeah, there were surf shops everywhere. They were like the cool clothes for kids in, I guess, what you call middle school and like primary school to wear.
So I'm just left sitting here thinking like, why, like great, but why did the surf craze extend to inland Utah?
Yeah.
What were we doing? Why were we wearing surfwear?
Well, it's kind of encouraging to hear that like the cultural imperialism worked the other way a little bit.
Oh yeah,
a lot of American culture here. So
well, there was something that people refer to as like the Australian moment, right, here in America.
Yeah, right.
Was it Dundee? Was it Crocodile Dundee? Was it, I don't know, was it surfing itself? I'm not sure what I
don't know. I think there's been a few, because that was when Australia kind of really, like Crocodile Dundee definitely was where like Australia kind of entered the American psyche, I guess, in terms of this really stereotypical like,
oh yeah,
a lot of these crazy idiots on the other side of the planet.
It's like Texas, but it's a whole country.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I mean, I live in Australia, so I have no idea what the bloody zeitgeist is like there, but you know, there's a few moments that you kind of hear about. Hugh Jackman seems to be one, and Chris Hemsworth. And
oh yeah,
there are these like breakout stars that kind of bring it back to the forefront of like, oh, that's right, Australia exists, and they're all crazy down there.
Yeah, I wonder, should I just like get it out of my system real quick and just be like that's not a knife, this is a knife. Maybe the dingo ate your baby. Put a shrimp on the Barbie. Have some Vegemite sandwiches.
You
there.
took most of them off, I think. Yeah, well done.
There we go. Now it's out. I won't have to do any more stereotypical jokes here.
Yeah, it's good to change the system before you get going. Although
right.
Your American audience seems to love them, so
yeah, so they'll probably come back.
Save them.
Yeah, we will still use them. I do want to ask you about some of those things, though, because like, you know, like it's very easy as an American to be like sort of culturally have some cultural blinders on, you know?
Yeah. Totally.
Just because like, I mean, it's so easy to just soak in what is produced in my own. Everything around me is just like a mirror reflecting me back to me. And isn't that wonderful? Yeah. I don't have to think about other countries existing or anything like that, right? So
absolutely.
I'm going to say that I've preserved my natural ignorance with the purpose of being able to ask you questions. Because, you know, if I'd done research, then it wouldn't be any fun, right?
That's absolutely right. That's actually, so I'm an editor in my day job, and that's actually what we always use with like expert authors and things, and they kind of say like, oh, what would you know? You know, and you're like, I'm the audience that you need to influence. So if I don't understand it, no one else will.
Yeah. Now,
let's go with that.
and what is the other thing? Because I tried to like Google you a little bit and stuff like that. Do you work in conjunction with a university, or is it like an NPR situation, or like what's your day job? How does that work? Yeah,
so NPR situation. I'm like, what's that?
Again, you must reference my American culture.
Yeah, exactly. I have to try and get that in at every turn. So I manage an editorial team for a university. So a lot of people see kind of university in my title, and there's actually been a few pipers and things that I've met sort of online who have said like, oh, are you a professor, or do you teach at the university? And I don't. I have before, but I actually work for the marketing department of one of the big universities here in Australia. So yeah, we produce like digital and print magazines and stuff like that. So yeah, content stuff more. Yeah.
But now, see, I also assumed you were a professor. I thought, I mean, partly probably because of the persona that's been created within the chanter rank crowd, because you're like the person who knows stuff, you know. And
that was a complete fluke, by the way. I think it's intelligence by association or relativity, maybe. Sorry.
Well, you know, if nothing else, you've got the relativity thing for sure. But you're an intelligent person otherwise, so you don't have to only compare yourself to Josh and Andy to show that you have intelligence. But we did, when you and I were chatting before this, in sort of the lead up to this conversation here, we were talking about literature. Is that, I'm trying to remember now, is that what you taught when you were teaching?
Kind of. So I actually started out as a high school teacher, and then I ended up going back and retraining in publishing. So I, basically went from there into sort of more writing-based stuff, and then went back to uni and taught in how to edit books, basically. So that was where I kind of started out. So, so a little bit of literature stuff, but actually in terms of writing, the first like full-time sort of full-blown writing that I've done was actually the book I published this year with Andrew Douglas from the Pipers Dojo. So
yeah, that seems like I was gonna kind of say that for later, but it seems very natural to talk about it right now because you're talking about knowing about like editing books and stuff like that. What I haven't read that book yet. Once again, let's just say I preserved my ignorance so that I could ask you about it. I do plan to, but tell me about how that happened. Like, how did Andrew find you? What is the book, and like who's it for? Is it for new pipers? Would Stuart Little enjoy it? Is it for me? Who's it for? What's the whole thing? Talk to me about it.
Hopefully everyone would enjoy it. It's one of those, and I don't mean to sound like a wanker who's like, buy my book. But
go ahead. That's totally allowed here.
It's one of those things where, so Andrew and I kind of met actually through, Andy will kill me if I don't say it, but through him. So it was this, I'm going to go off on a tangent, but it was this weird tangent. So I actually only ever sort of got involved in any of the chanter and stuff because I started following them on social media years ago when they first started out. So I saw their very first post. I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Started listening. And then got talking to Andy through that and started taking solo lessons with him, which is how I ended up in Vegas.
Oh, I see.
And then through that, he kind of convinced me I should join the dojo because it would be heaps better for my piping than sort of sporadically and not very motivationally kind of taking lessons with him every now and then.
Right. So you were taking lessons directly from him, not via his position at the dojo.
Yeah, exactly. And actually it was Andy who kind of funneled me into it and said, like, I think you'd get more out of this because it's more constant, which I kind of needed. And then through that I met Andrew, and it was actually great timing because at the same time I was sort of developing all of my professional skills, and it kind of hit this, like, when there's just those moments where it's like everything that seems to line up properly. And
serendipitous. Yeah,
absolutely. The pandemic hit, so that was kind of being stuck inside all the time. So I actually worked my way through, I think probably like 80% of the dojo course catalogue when I was just stuck inside.
Way to go.
I know.
Way to use your time.
I know. So I was like, stuff it. If like everyone's picking up a hobby, I'm just going to get really good at bagpipes.
Do you guys know about Netflix in Australia? We have this thing in America.
We got a few of those. I alternated with that too. I had a lot of free time. I cannot stress it up.
Yeah.
So because I got really familiar with the content, got to know Andrew a little bit as well through the classes and stuff like that, and he realized I had the skill set as well. So he was like, hey, like, this is something I've always wanted to do. The timing seems really right. Like, would you be interested? And I'm like, sure. Like, I've got nothing better to do, and it sounds like a great project. So let's do it.
Nice.
Yeah, so I guess the book itself is kind of, the elevator pitch is kind of, I guess I can say it on your show. Can I swear on this?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I hope you, as long as you're not offended that I do some editing afterward, I'm not offended. Absolutely if you just speak freely.
Unfortunately, I know that this is not common for most Americans, but most Australians, like, literally, like, everything, well, I know that Josh and Eddie make fun of it on the chanter end, but like swearing is part of our vernacular.
Yeah, don't worry. Actually,
it's very common.
When I was not when I was a child, when my mom went to university, she went to a conservative religious university, but had two roommates from Australia. And so even through the filter of being conservative religious people at a conservative religious university, she still got a lot of exposure to words she'd never heard before.
Actually, is that BYU?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Because it's funny actually you mentioned that complete tangent again. I do a lot of tangents, sorry. But I was doing job interviews recently, so I sat on a job interview panel at the work that we have, and the head of our art museum actually worked at BYU for like 12 years. Yeah, he's a Mormon bloke, but he was, he just, like, is really famous in the Australian art scene, but kind of got headhunted by BYU because he was a Mormon in the community who got it.
We got to snatch him where we find him.
Yeah, exactly.
Get over here.
Like the tiniest bit about BYU just because he told me a lot about it, so it was really interesting. He actually said it, interestingly enough, it was one of the most progressive he's ever worked for. Huh. And that may seem very
very, there you go.
Strange to hear about a conservative university, but he said, during the time that he was there, they were very big on kind of bringing in diverse like thought and like bringing in thought leaders from all different kind of faiths and
that's good.
And emerging leaders and stuff like that.
That does make sense, actually. They have a lot of like sort of like residential faith leaders of other faiths and stuff like that. And it does, I mean, I don't, far be it for me to know, right? But I wonder to what degree there's like sort of a pendulum thing where it can only hang on one extreme for so long and then it starts swinging the other way.
Absolutely, yeah. But that fascinated me because you have this probably very unfair but stereotypical idea in your mind of kind of what a religious, a very religious university like the way you would be like, and then you hear these opposing things. You're like, oh wow, okay, it's not. Not as bad as you thought. Yeah.
It's a little bit like finding out that Andy Fusco is a good bagpipe teacher and can. Yeah.
And Andy's actually, plug for Andy, is a very good bagpipe teacher.
Yeah.
But yeah, so. What was I talking about? Oh, the book. So I can swear on the podcast. That's the main thing.
Oh yeah, that's what we were talking about. Swearing.
So the premise of the book that Andrew and I joked about kind of privately and never did any publicity for it ever was that it's like basically how to unfuck yourself. So if you're,
I see.
if you're a piper that kind of learned in the way as so many of us did, I know I certainly did, but of kind of just going through like a community band who kind of teach a bit. Bits and pieces. So basically, if you don't grow up in sort of like a major Canadian or US or Scottish city, where kind of you come across a master and they teach you from scratch all of the old ways, which Andrew argues are also can be questionable and need to be challenged, which like all things do. But basically like you learn through a community band, you kind of learn enough to be functional in a parade setting, and then you just get chucked in a kilt and put out on parade and hope for the best and hope that you kind of learn by yourself, but you're not really given any support to continue learning the right way. And
to what degree do you end up in a situation where it's the blind leading the blind, and really the people who got you there, that's all the further they went themselves, and so how can they take you further? Now I want to dive into a little bit of a conspiracy theory thing here that there's probably no grounds for it at all, but I listened to Andrew Douglas's interview on the Chanter Rant about the book, and Josh would give him no end of grief. Wait, were you on that? Was it a multi-person?
Yes, it was,
yeah, that's right. You remember how Josh was giving Andrew no end of grief about how the chanter covers up the P so it looks like bagpipe?
Yes.
And Andrew Douglas was being kind of cagey, like there's a good reason for it, Josh. Is it because of the F word? Was Andy trying to make it so there was an F right in the middle, just as like a quiet, subtle reference to what the secret purpose of the book was?
Let's go with that.
All right.
Once art's out in the world, it becomes the audience's to interpret, right?
That's right. That's the rules. Yep.
Is no longer relevant.
Them's the rules. Take that, J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I'm sorry. Now I'm pulling you off the rails. Carry on.
No, I love it. So I guess the whole idea of the book was kind of Andrew's got basically the whole Dojo University is framed around these 5 freedom phases that he kind of does. So all of his curriculum set up that way now, and he runs all of his classes that way. And the idea is basically that you start from a foundation. It's basically the way you learn anything. So you start from a foundation of basic skills or core skills, and then you kind of build up from there. And so I know I certainly was taught this way, but so much bagpipe teaching is taught where it's kind of like you learn the scale, you kind of learn what the chanter looks like, and then you start immediately on kind of like, here's how you play grace note, here's how you play embellishments, and then eventually you kind of move on to playing tunes. And actually, as part of my bagpiping teaching, like I've done musical instruments before where I've learned rhythm, but I never learned any rhythm as part of any of my bagpipe teaching up until I started with Andy in the dojo. So that's kind of his whole thing, is that you kind of start with rhythm and then you build on layers from that, and you actually don't touch embellishments until phase 5. So it kind of reverses the entire way that sort of band teaching has ever, and I think probably I've never learnt that way, but what I've heard of traditional teaching kind of does the same thing.
It's kind of exciting to hear you just talking about it, because it does, like, I'm also a person who's like, I've done music other than bagpipes, and so it always did feel like bagpipes were like a thing apart from the rest of sort of like Western music standards, Well,
they're treated that way, right? Like, even when I started, it was this whole like, I mean, what attracted me to them was kind of the novelty of them, and I'd always liked the sound of them. And to be honest, I was a little bit tipsy in a pub and saw a pipe band play and thought like, oh, that'll be fun to do. So that's just my origin story. Was kind of, I was at a pub and thought, hey, that looks like fun. But they were treated that way when I first started. So literally my tutors in the first band that I learned, and again, I think it's that whole, the pipe major of that band was very good. A lot of the tutors were sort of grade 3, grade 2 pipers, but they had been taught, they were teaching the way that they had been taught, which was exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And so they would say things like, oh, don't worry about that, you don't need to know. Or
yes, you hear that so often.
Bagpipes are just different. Don't question it. Or like, I'd be sitting there because I've read music before, so I'm sitting there reading it going, well, why doesn't that rhythm line up? And they'd be like, oh, don't worry about it, pipes are just played differently.
Yeah.
That's just how we write it. Like,
right. Why isn't there a C sharp or C or F sharp written here? Oh, don't worry about that. Why do we call it A when it's not A?
And so I'm just, I often joke with my team at work because one of them's obsessed with Harry Potter that, you know, I'm a Ravenclaw through and through. Like I always need to know like how things work and like what, and so that like having someone else be that, like the repository of all of that knowledge used to drive me to tears because I was just like, why can't I know how this works so that then I can, you know, figure out how to improve it or you know, take the next step. And so
you need to be a bit more of a happy Hufflepuff and just do what you're told.
Exactly. So yeah, so in finding the dojo stuff, that's kind of what the book's about. So it's centered around the 5 phases, but the first chapters are kind of setting up. Basically, the intro is trying to convince you need to do this, because a lot of people are very resistant to it. I think it sounds, you know, like an interesting approach and like it all makes a lot of sense. And then it's actually really hard. And so when it comes to the hard work bit, your ego kind of kicks in and you're like, oh, I should know how to do this by now. Or you get really embarrassed that, you know, you can't clap a basic rhythm on the beat and all this sort of stuff. And I think then you kind of go like, oh, you revert back to what you're comfortable with. Exactly. Yeah. So the first few chapters is just kind of trying to set that up. Then we go into the freedom phases, and at the end it's kind of just a bit of a rant about like all of the issues. So basically like how you can translate this to your pipe band and how you can translate this to being a, you know, busy adult as we all are, kind of with other priorities. Most of us, piping is just a hobby. So how do you know, integrate this in with your life? And then basically how do you free yourself from those ego traps that kind of keep you from really embracing this and setting yourself free musically on the bagpipes, which is, as we know, one of the hardest instruments to master. So.
Yeah. I like that it's so practical in that way that, you know, that it would even acknowledge that this is a hobby for most of us, you know, because it's like so often a lot of the really good advice that you can find, it's like, I don't know to what degree it's like they're purposefully by the people who are sharing that good advice. It's probably more internal, the internal monologue that we all have going, right? But it's like, if I'm not professional, then I'm failing kind of thing, you know, rather than just being like, I can just enjoy the journey.
Well, I think so many of us too, and, you know, people make their jokes about, you know, service bands and bands that don't particularly take it seriously. But like so many of us are still like have even transitioned onto the bagpipes because we are high achieving people. Like, like it takes a lot of work to get from a practice chanter to learn what you need to get to playing on bagpipes. And I think that is inherent in most pipers, is that we're people who enjoy kind of taking on something hard and feeling like we've mastered it. And that's one of the things that I love the most about the bagpipes, is that it continues to kick your ass. Like, it doesn't matter how much you learn, there's always something else that you can kind of get better at, and it's a lifetime journey, which is part of what's so exciting about it. But that's so true. Like, it's just that internal monologue of kind of, I've failed, and it's that fear of failure and fear of what will people think of me, which I kind of made the argument in the book that I think is almost like evolution. It's like, you know, we're social creatures, and we, you know, we're part of a group of group mentality. So like, you know, basically early humans needed to be in a group to survive, or we would have been eaten by predators. So I think that fear of social ostracization and fear of, you know, being rejected because of something is actually like an inherent primal kind of drive that we want to avoid. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's part of it, like on a subconscious level. But then I think another big part of it is obviously just that as adults we hate being embarrassed. So, so it's kind of one of those things where confronting those things about yourself is actually one of the bravest things that you can do. But a lot of people, you know, shy away from it because they're not prepared to do that. But that is the step that you need to go through to get better. So
yeah, it's so interesting as you talk about this sort of like idea of like sort of the social evolutionary biology playing into it and stuff, that like in order to improve playing bagpiping, like so many of us would be in a situation where we need to be okay with messing up, and not just messing up, but messing up in front of our pipe band, which is like, it's our intensely in group. So it's like we've set up a tribe that we really care about what they think of us. And so it's like, it's only an even stronger drive to not let them see that we, you know, messed up.
Well, and how many times have you had, like I hear this all the time because I'm pipe sergeant in my band. I help tutor our learners and, you know, lead pipers through things. Learning new tunes and things, and I'll hear this all the time from pipers where we're trying to drill it out of them, but you know, you'll be playing through something, they'll be like, oh, you know, I'm just going to practice it at home, or like, yes, you know, I just need to look at it a few more times slowly by myself. And it's like, well, no, let's do it all together now. Like, everyone could benefit from that. But even getting some people to admit that, or to play publicly in front of everyone one-on-one, like that's been a huge step, because previously in pipe bands I've played with, you know, the pipe major will just play with everyone playing around the table. You never kind of pick anyone's, you know, individual playing apart, and then you just keep going. But, you know, I think we'd made the point in the book that kind of, it doesn't matter who the weakest link is. Like everyone's as weak as that link. So you need to bring everyone's standard up, because you're always going to fall down to the lowest common denominator, for want of a better word. And that's not meant derogatorily or anything, but like
sure.
Like that person's playing is always going to be what pulls you down in a competition and that sort of stuff. So it's not about trying to point them out and make them embarrassed about it. It's trying to bring them up and make sure that everyone else is on board to support them to get there. So.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing that, like, not to get too woo woo to what's the word for this, like non tangible here, but I can't help thinking of the fact that, like, ever since I was a small child, I know that this is kind of weird, and if people who have real disabilities can definitely think I'm a terrible person for this, because it's a weird thing to think, but when I was a child, I always thought it would be so cool to be in an accident where I would lose an arm or a leg or an eye or something like that, because of course I assumed that the technology existed to give me a bionic arm or leg or eye, and it would just be so much cooler, right? But it sticks with me, because I do think to myself, like, if I lost, say, my arm, then you could say that that's now a weakness. It's the weakest part of my body, is this missing arm, right? But then if you put a bionic arm on it, it's actually stronger than what it was before, And I wonder if it's too silly to sort of draw that into this idea that, like, if we're willing to recognize within the pipe band, like, if we are one body, we're one thing, if we're willing to recognize where there are difficulties, it's not to make any one person feel bad, but if we all work together to strengthen that difficult part, that person who's having a hard time with rhythm, if we all work together to improve their sense of rhythm, everybody's going to improve. And it's like, that could become your bionic arm. It could actually really make a big difference. Yeah. Is it a good analogy? Well, thank you.
I love it.
I was scared diving into it. Sitting here taking note of the timestamp so I know where to cut stuff out later.
Exactly. This could all go south. We'll figure it out. And I mean, I'm not disabled either, obviously. So, if there's anyone disabled out there that we're upsetting, obviously take it with a grain of salt. But no, I think that's a really interesting concept. And I think every kid's kind of thought that when they've seen, a superhero movie, or you see, like, Iron Man, for example, is one of the first, like, big Marvel ones where, he copped shrapnel to the heart, but then overcame it with intelligence. He's one of the only Marvel superheroes that doesn't have an inherent superpower. His superpower is his brain. Yeah. But he's replaced it with this thing that's made him super strong and has created the suit and all this sort of stuff. And you just think, that is inspiring in a different way. Whereas kind of, you want this other part. But yeah, it's so true about the pipe band thing with and I think that's an interesting point about the difference between people who are very good solo pipers and people who make good band pipers, because it's being on board for that. I've heard a lot of pipers before who end up kind of quitting bands, or you see them shuffling around bands. We've got a couple here that we call band fours who kind of just like make their way around a whole bunch.
Yeah, they got 7 or 8 kilts in their closet.
Yeah, exactly. And it's often an ego thing where kind of they think they're better than the whole, but or they might be seeking something different for themselves, which is fine too. But that they like the result, but they don't want to put in the work to see others succeed.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I love about pipe bands, is that community focus, and that you do build a community, but you're also helping other people to achieve a goal in the thing that you love to do. So like you get to see people improve, and you get to see them love learning it, and then they catch the bug for it, and they see that it can be easier, and they kind of want to do it in and of themselves. And there's nothing more rewarding to me than when you're kind of working with someone and you see them start to take off on their own, like they're asking you questions about, hey, I noticed this thing happening when I was practicing, like how can I do such and such, or like they come up with like, oh, I was listening to this tune, I'm interested, do you have the sheet music, like I want to learn it for myself. And like I just love when it kind of takes hold like that, where it's not that initial honeymoon phase, which all learners have, I think, where they're kind of fascinated by the instrument and the culture and all that sort of stuff. But it's like when they have that almost that second wind of kind of, they're stuck in the doldrums and then they pick it up again. I'm like, oh, I just love that moment.
I'm with you entirely. Yeah. I thought years ago, like I have an unhealthy ego usually, like I think too highly of myself. I'd like to think that I'm becoming more aware of it as I get older and am knocked on my butt over and over again, basically, right? But I fully expected when I was younger
emotional maturity.
By like forced to have it, not by choice, right? but
exactly.
I think that when I was younger, I would have expected that it would be an unpleasant experience to see someone who I had taught to play, to see them playing better than I can play in any aspect,
Yeah.
But it's happened many times, and it's never not wonderful. It's just so exciting. It's a wonderful experience.
Well, and I love seeing too, like the milestones that people hit. So like it took me, I think like probably 12 months to go from starting to learn onto the pipes. We've got a guy who's just joined our band, for example. We call him the pipeinator. The pipe major and I are kind of always kind of, you know, having a few jokes about like, oh my God, I can't believe he's so motivated. But this guy will literally play pipes, like on pipes, full pipes for like an hour a day.
Wow.
Sometimes more if he can manage it. Like his wife has started making comments about like, this is not healthy. Like, he'll sit on chanter. But having said that, like he's come so far so quickly. So he started just at the end of the lockdowns for us last year, and he's already onto pipes, and he's learnt, you know, most of our repertoire, which is insane.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's just because he's caught the bug and he's just so into it. But his enthusiasm is quite infectious. Like so, and you get a few people like that in your band, and everyone else kind of gets a bit of a buzz from it too, which helps the group. So
it's true.
The dynamics are so interesting that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it can kind of reignite fires that have maybe started to die down in some of us.
Yeah, or there's a bit of that FOMO aspect that creeps in too. Where I think they kind of see, and it's the ego hit for them too, where they see like, oh, such and such has kind of learnt that way faster than I did. Yeah. Like, they only started last year, so
hang on a sec.
Maybe I should be putting some work in here.
Yeah.
So it's good that way too.
Yeah. Now, so in the book, when it comes to like you mentioned, like there's some ranting here and there and stuff like that. Yeah. Like you know, and I don't mean to double up on what other interviewers have already asked you about, Camille, but you know, to what degree is your would you call it a narrative voice? To what degree is your voice the one that I am getting out of the book as I read it? And to what degree is it Andrew's? Is it a mix of the two, or is it, you know, like what's the situation there?
Yeah, it's definitely a mix. So it's interesting you say that actually, because I think probably towards the later chapters is where you probably get a bit more of my voice, because Andrew kind of let me have a bit more free reign. And I say like it was very much a collaborative process, but like it's his book. So the book is written in his voice. So it's in first person speaking as Andrew, because a lot of the book is told through his memoirs and like stories about his life, which he very much wanted it to be. So it was Andrew's vision for the book, and I do have to say, like, it's Andrew's book, and I helped him write it basically. So he very kindly called me a co-author, but like the whole thing is his philosophy, it's his ideas, and kind of we collaborated on it, and I think produced a better result, which I think he'd agree with. But the idea behind the book is basically that it's a bagpiping book that is meant to be inspirational. It's meant to give you sort of like a blueprint for how you can improve your piping, but it's also meant to be something that you could actually sit down and enjoy reading. Sort of, so his whole like visual that he wanted was kind of like that you could sit on the couch with your dog in front of the fire, which is a foreign concept to me as an Australian. Like late at night, and kind of it would be something that you would reach for. So like it's something that you would enjoy picking up and kind of reading.
Well, here, Camille, for you folks out there in Australia, try to imagine this is the kind of thing that you could sit and read while you wait for your Billy to boil. I'm looking up the lyrics again here. What is it?
Well, yes, exactly. Waiting for our billies to boil in front of the billabong.
That's right.
For the yowie, yeah.
Sorry, carry on. No. So it's his thing, and you got to work with it, but we hear more of you toward the end.
I think so. So it's my writing style throughout, definitely. And like Andrew, the way we started was kind of that I was going to come on as like an editor, and so Andrew was going to write the whole thing, and then I'd help him sort of edit and publish it, and you know produce it. So we self-published. So I did all of the layouts and things as well. But we when he started, he wrote a couple of chapters, and as we got stuck into it, we kind of realised that it was actually probably going to be a lot easier if he just sort of gave me the outline of what he wanted to write, and then I would write it, and then we could kind of go back and forth, because we seemed to get a better result that way. And that way he could kind of feed into more to the ideas and less to the writing, because that was more my strength when it came to this style of writing. So Andrew's an excellent e-learning author, but when it comes to this sort of stuff, he was quite new to it. So I guess it was kind of just trying to find our strengths and work to them as the process kind of went on. So, but what we had in a lot of the earlier chapters is that like he would pick up things that I didn't even notice I was writing in. So a lot of Australianisms, like a lot of, I tend to tell stories a lot through sort of idioms and analogies, and so he would kind of roll those back a little bit and sound a bit more like him. So
like, Camille, you've got to write this in American. This doesn't make sense.
Pretty much. It really was though. He was like, I would never say this. I was like, yeah, no, fair enough. But I have no idea, because I'm like you, I've got my cultural blinkers on when it comes to that. So I know a little bit about American culture, but not much. Yeah. And American culture is so diverse and so different state to state, right? And even city to city in some places. So, so trying to sound like a, New York man, right. An Australian woman.
Yeah.
Right. It was a little bit difficult at times, but no, we got there. So, but in the first chapters, it was meant to be him sort of instructing the reader. So it was very much his voice that comes through there in terms of like, here's why you should do it. Here's my expertise. Like, here are stories that will convince you. And our hope in doing it, and what a lot of readers have kind of fed back to us already, is that we wanted people to feel validated. So we wanted people to see problems that they're having in their own piping and their own frustrations kind of reflected back at them and be like, wow, like I feel seen. Like, and this is something that could help me. So, you know, hopefully we've kind of achieved that. But more towards the end, so the freedom phases make up the bulk of the middle chapters, which is kind of the actual blueprint for kind of how to do this process. Sort of stepped out with the, you know, clear analogies and clear examples of kind of how people can do it. But towards the end is where we get more into those sort of philosophical chanters, and I think that chapters, sorry, and I think that's where he kind of Freudian slip there. And I think that's where he I think that's where he kind of just let me kind of go to town. So for a couple of those chapters, he actually, the pipeband one's very much him, because it's all about his sort of experiences in RMM, like the Canadian bands growing up and kind of into Inverary and stuff like that. But the final chapters are more sort of rants, I suppose, about the culture and kind of what it's like to be in lower grade bands. And for those, he kind of just gave me some dot points of the ideas that he wanted to cover. And basically I just read the whole thing and he kind of fed into it.
He didn't say something like, hey, Camille, I don't know what it's like to be in lower grade bands. So will you just go ahead and take care of that? You obviously do. So will you just do that?
Yeah, he was very diplomatic about that, though. But I mean, he has played in lower grade bands.
Yeah, I'm just joking.
In his career or whatever, but he, so it was just funny. Like, he basically just realised that I was going to be able to to find enough fodder to just go to town and then come back in and try and ramp me back a bit. So it was funny, actually, that in the first few chapters he was going on a bit and I was having to kind of edit him back, and then towards the end I was just going to town on, you know, basically just having a rant about all of this stuff that's an issue that we need to fix. And he's like, this might have gone too far, and maybe this is too nasty, and like maybe we need to not be so harsh about this.
So then he's pulling
I think
you
readers
back.
might get offended if he did. And it was funny, actually, we had a couple of speaking of swearing, we had a couple of swear words in there, and I think in the end we actually only have one, and it's part of a quote, and that we kind of refer back to. But
then you can justify it as long as it's in quotes. I mean, that's exactly a trick. That's a trick that I knew as a kid growing up. As long as you put air quotes in the air with your fingers, you could say anything.
Yeah, you can just get away with it. Exactly. But it's funny, actually, because we'd sent it to a couple of sensitivity readers in the US and also to a bunch of like expert readers. So we sent it to, you know, Richard Parks and, you know, a couple of big names that kind of Andrew knew of, and, you know, Big Rab and the Chanter Boys and stuff like that, just to try and get some reader quotes and some feedback on if we were on the right track. And it's funny, a couple of the sensitivity readers came back and just said like, oh, I think this actually cheapens the book. And I was like, really? I think in the Australian market it would strengthen it. But again, it's just proof that I don't know, you know, because we find people who swear very, you know, it's a form of relationship building, really. Like, if you swear in front of someone, it means that you trust them enough to kind of, you know,
like a show of authenticity or something.
Yeah, exactly. And like genuineness is such a big part of our culture that like that's the big thing. Like, if you do that, it means you like someone.
Yes,
so
genuineness.
That. Like,
that's not a thing for us, Camille.
I know it is for some Americans, and it's so interesting consuming your media and consuming your culture, and then seeing how that compares to who I meet over there. And it's just it's always been very interesting. It's one of the reasons I love travel, because you just get to challenge so many assumptions that you have.
Now, speaking of which, when you have traveled around, have you ever done bagpipe specific traveling? Like, have you ever gone to Scotland for the Worlds or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting you say that, because pretty much all of my travelling has been bagpipes.
Oh, has it really? So you're glad you came into this bagpiping stuff, huh?
Yeah, well, it was one of the things that drew me to it, actually. It was kind of the band that I started playing with did biannual international trips, and they weren't by no means so they were grade 4, which for us is I think that's like your grade 5, grade 4, because we didn't have a grade 4B at that stage. So very, very low grade band. You know, quite competent players, but their focus was very much on sort of pub playing and festival playing and that sort of thing. And a lot of fun for that reason. But one of the things that I wanted to play with them for is that they went on this biannual overseas trip. So basically, if you contributed to band gigs, you got a subsidised fare overseas. So,
so you learned to play bagpipes for the travel perks.
Absolutely. Well, it was one of the very strong reasons. Actually, the main reason that I started joining, this is a very Australian thing, I think, but was that they promised us free beer at the lesson.
Oh no! Seriously?
Yes.
You really
free lessons and free beer. So I was like, okay, sold. I'll be there every week.
All right. Okay, we referenced The Simpsons when we were chatting before. That Australia episode will forever be one of my very favorites. You remember the scene when Marge and Homer are sitting there and Marge tries to order a coffee and the Australian guy's like, beer? She's like, coffee, beer, coffee, beer. So that's real then, huh? It's totally real. Okay.
I generally like to challenge stereotypes, but no. Actually,
sometimes they're bang on.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of coffee, though, and I'm just going to put in a plug, and I can feel Andy Fusco rolling his eyes from here, but I cannot rate any of the coffee I've tried in America. Our coffee here is far superior, so you'll have to come down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, but so what is Andy going to be? Why would Andy be offended by that? I feel like
I just bitched about it every day I was in Las Vegas.
Oh, just so that it was the swill.
Yeah. I went to visit in 2019. I was there for 2.5 weeks for the Vegas games and just exploring the area and stuff. And so being Vegas, we did go out drinking a lot, and so I'd wake up the next morning sort of
to your cup of dirty water.
Yeah, pretty much. And just getting frustrated that every coffee place I tried just in no way.
So what?
Yeah.
Now you know that
Besides.
next time you come to Vegas, you're gonna just bring a bunch of dry roast packs in your suitcase, so you'll be ready.
Just bring my own. Come prepared. Yeah. I just kept, because Josh kept threatening to make me a good coffee, but he never tried, and I'm still convinced that maybe he just couldn't. Yeah, was just afraid that he might not live up to it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I do feel like Australia has better coffee, and that's probably a very arrogant statement, so you'll all have to come down here and prove me wrong.
Well, I feel like probably everybody has something that they get to claim, right? Everybody gets something, so if you want that, you can have that. That's fine with me. I mean, you also have the best Vegemite, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. The only Vegemite.
Yeah, exactly.
Vegemite's such a funny thing. I get it because it is an acquired taste, but it's something that we're raised on. So I guess it's like, people who are from Southeast Asia or India or whatever, sort of being very, resilient to hot foods and that sort of thing. For you guys, South America too, I guess. Mm-hmm. But like Vegemite is just such a staple here. Like, I'm actually not joking. Every time I travel overseas, the first thing I do when I get home, to the point where when I got back from my last trip, my sister had actually stocked my fridge with it because I'd left it in the fridge, and she'd done it to help me, but is a Vegemite and butter sandwich on white bread. Really? Yeah, I crave it.
It's another thing, Camille, that I would have thought was an inaccurate, unfair stereotype.
Yeah. That one is spot on. Like,
wow,
we
really?
do. Like, Vegemite on toast is like a classic. And it's in that what is it? That Men at Work song.
Yeah.
She just I said, "You speak my language." She's like, "Give me a Vegemite sandwich."
Vegemite sandwich.
So
yep.
It's just part of. It's just most Australians. It's a thing for us. So
put it into little squeezy pouches for your babies and all that. Just
exactly.
Raise them right.
Well, see, and this is the thing I think people do wrong. Like, you don't eat Vegemite straight. It's kind of like saying I love vodka and then drinking it straight. And, like, you can get to that point, but, like, people who do that first off, like, if you do that in front of an Australian where you just scoop it out of the, like, jar and eat it straight, an Australian will make a face at you, like, you meant to have it sparingly.
I see. We must treat it as a garnish. So these experiences that we Americans have where it's like, hey, I bought a tube of Vegemite, you want to try it? And you squeeze it into a spoon and then just eat a spoonful of it. We're not doing it right. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
I see.
Just trialing it without the right context.
Okay.
But, it's funny, like, it's got so many different, like, cheese and Vegemite sandwiches, and, like, peanut butter and Vegemite some people like. And,
really?
Butter and Vegemite. So you've usually got to have something to cut it with, because otherwise it's way too... Because it's made from... Anyone who's listening to your show who doesn't know, Vegemite is basically... It was actually a industrial waste product. So
of course it was.
Yeah. So, and then it was one of those classic things where it was, like, a different purpose, and then they realised, hey, like, we could package this. So I think it was actually during... I'm probably just talking to him out of my ass now, but they, the legend goes that they kind of, during the Depression era, realised that they could use it as an additional food product and then marketed it. And it was like one of Australia's best marketing campaigns. So, Happy Little Vegemiters was like the little marketing campaign to try and get kids to eat this industrial waste product, which is basically just like a very yeasty, it's kind of like something, there's a lot of like Vegemite recipes that you can do with stews and roasts and things like that. So it's almost like a... what would you call it? Like a stock or something that you would add.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah.
To make it really, because it's very salty and very thick, and but it's just really, really good. Yeah,
I once as a child popped a square of bouillon like soup, like chicken. No, I can't think of the word. A little. Stock? The solid ones that you would drop. Yeah, the concentrate ones. I popped one of those in my mouth thinking it was a chocolate or something, and it was rough. But it did kind of reminisce it kind of connects in my mind with my experience eating a spoonful of Vegemite, so it makes sense that you could make soup out of it. So
you like smell colors with that thing.
Yeah, totally.
It's like this, sensory overload.
Yeah. Now, I pulled you off the book, though, Camille. I wanted you to have a full chance to, you've convinced me, I'm going to go buy my copy. So where should we be getting them? Is there a better place for you and Andrew? Like, does Amazon take a cut, so you'd rather we buy it somewhere else? Or, what's the deal there?
Yeah, it's funny because we talked about so many different distribution models when we first started. And the first thing we talked about was we should, initially it was, hey, let's just use this as a lead gen for dojo stuff, and then we realized this is actually a book people would probably buy in their own right. We should try and sell it that way. Mm-hmm. So we looked at Amazon and stuff like that. We actually realized that the bagpiping community is so niche that that's probably not the best approach. So Andrew's actually set up his own e-commerce, and we're not offering it on any other platforms at the moment. So so you can buy it from some brick and mortar stores. I think Andrew's been supplying it to a couple of the Canadian ones and a few across the US and stuff like that. So if you've got a local bagpiping supplier who stocks it, they've probably got a couple of copies in stock. But if you go online to bagpipefreedom.com, Andrew's classic marketing brain. So yeah, so he's set that up, and if you go to bagpipefreedom.com, you can just buy a copy from there. And he runs sales from time to time too. So if you sign up for the dojo mailing list, every few months he kind of runs I think he did one for Labor Day for you guys a little while ago and stuff like that. And the plan is kind of that every now and then there'll be sales on it too, but otherwise it's just available, and it's just print on demand. So when you purchase a copy, it gets printed and shipped straight from the distributor. So yeah. Awesome.
Well, I'll make sure there's a link for that in the notes as well, if that's not easy enough to remember. If we just go down and click on it, anybody wants to buy it. And I feel like I'd like to ask you more stuff about books.
Yeah.
To what degree is you're working in digital media and stuff like that as well, right? But what part of it do you love? Do you like the formatting? Do you like coming up with a cover? Do you like producing content? Do you prefer editing? What do you really, really love about this kind of work?
Is it wanky to say all of it?
No, that's fine. Next question.
I love creation. And it's funny actually, because I've always called myself an editor. And to be honest, in uni and previously, I gravitated towards that. So I preferred to edit other people's work than sort of to write my own. But as I've started, I think it's about having ideas and inspiration, all that sort of stuff, and working with other people. I think that's something I've learned about myself over the last few years, is kind of I get the most inspiration out of being around other people, which is really odd for me because I'm an massive introvert. So spending too much time around people very much drains me of energy. But when I'm, reading other ideas and diverse thought, and kind of, I love consuming knowledge and interpreting it and thinking about how it applies to other things that I know and how that can help me to learn new things and think in different ways and change the way that I think and kind of challenge the way that I think. I think that's such a powerful thing to be able to do. And so that's something that I love, but you can do that in all aspects of the writing, editing and publishing process. So my background is in print media, and print content. So I've produced, magazines and books and things like that. I used to work for a textbook publisher. I worked for Penguin for a bit.
Ooh, Penguin.
Big
deal.
I've done a bit of trade publishing stuff, mostly in sort of editorial assistant stuff, and then I moved into development editing and structural editing for Pearson, which at the time was their textbook off-sider. Now they're a learning company. But then, got more into sort of educational publishing, and then into this corporate sort of magazine-y stuff. So, and a lot of the stuff we do now is very short form article content. So it's interesting because I probably I reckon I read probably about between 10 and 20,000 words a day. Good heavens. Just in emails and stuff. So it's funny, actually, I've gotten really into audiobooks lately because I read so much for work.
Give your eyes a break.
Yeah, exactly. I'm reading, articles from, authors on my team, or, content that we're considering, or other places where you're kind of reading on similar issues and doing research and things like that. So as well as just emails, the volume of emails that you, have to kind of read and write, in a day job now is ridiculous. Yeah. Which actually, as another tangent, is something that I don't think any of us acknowledge enough, which is that life is busier now. It's just so much yes. Our parents and their parents, our grandparents kind of often complain about. So I'm 35, but I feel even to my bones exhausted now to a level that I don't think my parents have ever felt before, because they've never worked in a corporate job where you're consuming this much content all the time. And your brain's not built for this much information intake. Which
Take
is
that, boomers.
So much. Yeah, exactly.
The millennials ain't the snowflakes. You don't know what it's like.
But it's just like our brains are constantly reacting to having more and more content. Now that we've got, scroll media and, social feeds and all that sort of stuff, like we're taking in so much information constantly. And, in uni and stuff, you learn through advertising modules and stuff that I think it takes between 10 and 20 touch points of something before it enters your psyche. I think it's actually probably going to be way higher in future, because for something to actually permeate that constant noise of information is going to be so much harder. So, or have to tie really cleverly to something that you really care about. So
have you ever read Fahrenheit 451?
Yes.
Do you remember that part when it's Guy Montag, right? He's the main character.
Yep.
When he's on the train and he's trying to remember something that he's read, but it's like all he can hear is this advertisement for like a toothpaste, and it keeps like breaking through, and he almost gets it, but then it breaks through again and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was just making my brain come through my mouth there. I'm sorry. There was nothing. I have nothing else to say. Carry on, Camille. Sorry.
No, it's so true though. It's like the advertising is getting so much more clever these days. So like I actually really like it because I work in, marketing tangentially through content, but like I love when you kind of see someone doing something really clever, because it's so not easy, because like no marketing is easy these days, but like it's very straightforward, I think, to kind of just apply a standard comms or marketing plan to a product or something that you're trying to sell.
Yeah.
But to think in a really novel way where you're actually breaking the fourth wall almost of kind of social media and kind of the way that people are taking in information and content these days is really, it takes a different way of thinking I think, to do that. And you see things like, you'll be scrolling and you'll see an ad that looks like a social media feed, but then someone reaches through it and it's almost like that Ring moment of like seeing what's the name,
and that one in particular is excellent, because I don't know if it's only me, but I was scarred permanently by that movie, and so that has a real effect. Really talk about grabbing the reader by the lapels. That does it for 100%.
Sure. So, and you see things like that in the feed and you're like, whoa, that's clever. Like I love when you see those little moments that just like actually shock you, like which is hard to do these days, I guess. So, it's interesting. But anyway, sorry, I forgot what we were talking about.
Well, let's see. You read a lot, and and you were telling me about how much you consume there, and it did make me want to ask you, like, what we talked a little about Lord of the Rings when we were messaging back and forth and stuff like that. And you did teach did you say in secondary school? I'm trying to remember, how do you say it in Australia? Is it still high school there?
High school, yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. Whew. Yeah. Don't have to remember all these terms.
Nothing in Australia really makes sense. So we have primary school and high school.
Okay, yeah.
Primary school and secondary school.
Right. Nope, just going to mix everything all together in a big pot. Exactly. Add some Vegemite. It's delicious.
Exactly right. Pretty much life. You just summed it up. Yeah.
What were you teaching there? Was it English that you were teaching there, or was it something else?
Yeah, so English, ancient history, modern history. So,
whoa, cool.
But what's interesting is, so I had never studied modern history at uni, so I did ancient medieval history because I'm a massive nerd. And as you say, like I was a massive Tolkien buff during
oh yeah, and stuff is like he not the king of all medievalists? Like if you're interested in medieval stuff at all, you got to read Tolkien. Yeah. Yeah,
he's the grandfather of the bloody genre.
Yeah.
But he or fantasy anyway. But he So I like studied ancient history, medieval history in English, mostly because I actually started doing archaeology. Because, you see Indiana Jones, you kind of think like, yeah, I'm going to be an archaeologist. This is great. And then
of course,
I kind of got like 2 semesters in, I'd, taken classes in Latin and stuff like that as well. And I was like,
when do we learn to crack a whip?
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, I had all these grand visions, I think, of like how cool it would be to work as an archaeologist, but I hadn't actually done any research into what the practicalities of that would be. And I think after like half a year of kind of, metering out, very specific centimeters on a bloody dig site.
Yeah.
And kind of looking at, and I was like, oh, this is like a science thing. I don't actually enjoy this, which is not true. I did really enjoy it, but I just went, oh, this is
you need like 18th century archaeology, where like this like Jacksonian era, when you can just like go buy a bunch of land and dig it up willy-nilly however you like, exactly. Make up a story about whatever you find and you're famous.
And then just chuck it in a museum. And
that's right,
back to the people that originally owned it.
Oh yes, absolutely. You must take it away from the people to whom it belongs.
That's rule one. One of
rule number one.
But what was interesting about it, I think, is that like I kind of got stuck into it and just realized like, oh, this there's not much in Australia that you can do with archaeology that's not related to Indigenous people, which actually is funny because at the age I am now, I'm actually really interested in Indigenous culture. But in Australia, our Indigenous cultures are not, well, were not at the time taught in our school curriculum at all. So I knew next to nothing about them, and I wasn't really excited about them. So I was kind of like, well, I don't really want to, you know, study for, because at that stage you had to do not just undergrad but a master's, and then basically be studying a doctorate to be able to make any money sort of as an archaeologist. And I was like, I don't really want to be doing that while I'm, you know, traipsing over, you know, like palm and, you know, power shells in Northern Territory and that sort of thing. So it was either move to Europe, which I didn't want to do at the time, or, you know, study something different. So that's when I got into history. But yeah, so I taught in English and history in high school. And then once I got stuck into high school teaching, the system here, yeah, I actually love teaching, but I found a better home for myself as an adult, a teacher of adults at university. So I went back and did my master's and, went into publishing there. So, but I studied literature and stuff at uni and taught in literature in high school, but yeah.
So like as a child, do you remember the first time you started like of your own volition because you wanted to read like what you were seeking out? Was there anything in particular that like you really loved, like that got you hooked on the written word?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a voracious reader. I think, you know, it's that classic thing of like, oh, I think my parents were the ones who got me into it. But mum and dad always had books around. Like, I just remember we always had bookshelves full of books, and it was that whole immersion thing of like you'd see dad reading, or, you know, you'd be getting through it. And I've got 2 older brothers and a younger sister. And so my older brother and I used to read the same books. And so you'd get stuck into these like, you know, young adult series and things like that. And I just couldn't get enough. Like it was early obsession for me. It was kind of the Animorphs series, or, you know, the Goosebumps
Animorphs,
series,
like,
that sort of stuff where you kind of, they'd come out monthly too, which I think was like very, there was that whole Scholastic book fair thing, which we definitely had down here as well. But like,
I got my parents stuck in the Goosebumps thing.
Yeah.
They were stuck paying for that for years.
But it's interesting, like I always gravitated to fantasy and science fiction. So like, you know, girls I was friends with in school, and boys too, but like we're into sort of Babysitters Club and, you know, like Saddle Club and all that sort of stuff. But I always gravitated towards these really like epic, fantastical kind of stories. And to be honest, I'm not really sure why. Like, it was just something that always interested me more, was just this idea of escape. And I learned, I think, quite early on that they were analogies for everyday life. And I just loved how clever that was. Like, that it didn't have to be a real story, that it could be a fake story, but it was like an analogy for social issues or whatever. Right. And I just loved how clever that was, and how many layers there were to it, and how much you could do with that, and how much really that science fiction and fantasy authors can get away with that you couldn't at the time say in like if you take Animorphs, for example, like it's bonkers that story was ever put to print, because it's effectively like these traumatized kids who are basically forced into an intergalactic war and go through horrific shit. Like, when you look at the actual scenarios that they're put into and the choices that they have to make as teenagers, like they're basically war veterans by 16. And with all of the like Kay Applegate? Yeah. Doesn't shy away at all from like showing the horrors of that and the psychological effect that has on the characters. Like, and it gets real dark towards the end of that series. And like, because it had a cute, like, animated front cover every time. Like,
it's good for kids.
Parents are just like, absolutely,
give it to the kids.
This is a kid's book.
I wonder, my wife and I have had this discussion often when we're, like, looking at books as well as movies and stuff that we watched when kids or read when kids. And, like, now we've got kids who are, like, our oldest is about 9 years old now, and he's quite the reader himself. And so it's like, oh, yeah, I love this when I was a kid. And then we pause and think, but why was I ever allowed to read it? That's like, as an adult looking back, it's like, no, that's not age appropriate at all. There's some heavy stuff in there, you know?
And I think it's too, like, it was that whole, like, you know, sexual panic thing that was the thing when we were kids of, like, you know, don't let the kids think they can have sex. Or, like, you know, don't talk about anything sexual. But you can have horrific violence.
That's right.
And, like
a lot of blood.
Like, absolutely. And it's like, isn't that way worse? Like,
yeah, exactly. It's so like true.
Moral panic kind of, you know, and very religiously driven, I think, but, like, very kind of, like, you know, we could go into it for days, but like this very, you know, you must be very, save yourself for marriage and be very pure and all this sort of stuff. So any deviation that we have from that, like, you know, would be atrocious, and, you know, it's going to corrupt our kids. And it's like, hang on. Right. It's horrific. And not even the violence wasn't even the worst, but I think it was more the psychological torture.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
There's an Animorphs book where one of the characters gets captured and, like, is tortured, but then the torturer realizes that she can use pleasure And the difference between that and the pain is what will actually break him mentally. Again, this is a book for young kids.
Yeah.
That this is being written in. And it was just stuff like that where looking back and you just think like, wow,
Yeah.
how was this ever published? And
Yeah.
that, like, 13, 14-year-olds, this is acceptable for them, But
and so, but I don't have an answer for this, Camille, but I'm curious, do you have a thought on this? Like, is what we're experiencing as 30-something-year-olds looking back, was it valuable though to have exposure to like darkness as a child? Was it good?
The answer is I don't know. Hey, and I think it's one of those things where it's like generational, right? So we're not going to know until the kids, I can say our kids, I haven't got any kids, but like my nieces and nephews, your kids, like whatever, kind of grow up, and we're trying. I think every generation tries to do better, right? So,
sure, yeah.
Like our parents were probably quite restricted by their parents in terms of what they could consume.
Yeah,
so they were trying to let us have what they couldn't.
Yes,
but having experienced that, we're kind of like, I don't think our kids should be doing this.
Maybe dial it back in a couple areas. Yeah,
exactly. And so I think the next generation's going to, like, I think it's just different. Like, they're going to have a different experience to us.
Yeah.
And probably we'll get up there and be like, they might go back the other way. Like everything old is new again, right? Everything goes in cycles. History
sure, yeah.
Constantly. So it could be that this is just the generation that kind of has things kept from them. And I guess like our parents' generation knew the horrors of war and all that sort of stuff. So why the hell would you inflict that on children? And so like the opposite then for us and vice versa. So I don't know. That's probably part of it. But yeah, I don't know that it's better or worse necessarily. I think it's just different.
Yeah.
I think we have a different perspective on
Right. That's a good point. Rather than turning into a dichotomy where we have to say better or worse, different often is probably the most correct answer.
Yeah. Obviously, as long as no one's being traumatized by anything.
Right,
a different experience.
Now, Camille, do you think, can you see any link at all between your interest, your sort of like what seems to be a natural inborn interest in fantasy, and your eventually playing the bagpipes? It is an instrument and a culture that gets kind of mythologized,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think definitely. Like, I definitely used to so my background is Irish and English, so obviously most every white Australian was not ever from here,
right? So it's kind of a closed system. You can pretty much guess.
Trace it back to where you were from. Very recent generations here, because I think Australia, this is something that always blows my mind when I go overseas. So Australia was first colonised in 1770, and Australia did not become a country until 1901. So
holy moly!
We're a very new country.
I didn't realize it was 1900s. My goodness.
Yeah. So like when the American Revolution was in the 1790s.
Yeah, about the same time. Well, 1776 is the year that often gets referenced, right? But it carried on for a while. Yeah.
But the Civil War for a while. So like around the time that the American Revolution was kind of happening was around the time that Australia was first, like, white people were basically, arguably for the most permanent time, because the Dutch had kind of travelled to Australia prior to that. But that was the first time that Captain Cook kind of, very famously set foot on Australian soil. And so when I go overseas, like, it's always fascinating to me that, like, everything is so old. You just walk around in London and it's like, oh, cool, I'm standing on a road that's from like 3000 BC,
right?
Because it's like a Roman road, and you're just like, what? Like, how does this even exist? Not quite to the exact same degree, Camille, but I also often have my mind blown. My wife is a history major. She's a really great historian, and so she's a great reference for me to ask questions. Like, I'm a very simple, not simple. I don't mean to seem so self-deprecating. I'm just not. I don't have very much like formal education. I've had very little interest in sort of like reading and stuff until very recently. So I'm kind of like a baby, Formal education is overrated.
Yeah, take that, universities. Yeah, you're allowed to say it, right?
I'm going to be perfectly honest though, like, formal education means nothing if you don't have enthusiasm. So people who are interested and have that thirst for knowledge run rings around people who have gone to university. So having said that, I think formal education has its place and it's definitely necessary in a lot of, like, in very functional careers, for example, like engineering and stuff like that. Like, you can be an enthusiast, but I wouldn't want you working at the thing. I'm going to be fired into the bloody
right. You don't want to have a heart surgeon being like, formal education, who needs it?
School of Hard Knocks, mate.
That's right. I get to practice on on the streets.
But I do think with stuff like this, like, self-deprecating, by the way, is part of Australian culture as well. So
well, there I can resonate with that for sure.
It's very familiar to me. But I don't think in history in particular, like it's something where if you're interested in a topic, you probably know more than someone who studied it and isn't interested.
Yeah. Well, my wife being both interested and having been well studied, I just like very often I have these like little epiphanies where I like realize just how old something is. And I go to her and I'd be like, sweetie, did you realize? And she's like, oh yeah, isn't that amazing? And guess what else? 3,000 years before that, this was happening. I'm like, what?
The ones that always blow my mind, there's this bloke I follow on Instagram called Idea Soup, I think it is.
Oh,
and to be honest, he's like, I can't watch him early in the morning because he's way too like energetic. It blows through the bloody phone.
Got to let your Australian coffee move through the system a little bit first to get ready for it.
Need to wake up a bit. But he does this that like he basically just finds like mind blowing facts and like he's just like all this stuff that really excites him and he kind of shares it. But he's been doing a series lately where he kind of does like, did you know how recently things that we take for granted were invented? Like the Heimlich maneuver wasn't invented until like I think it was like 1970 something. No, 1990 something.
Really?
No, it's the 70s. And
either way, goodness.
Heimlich was alive. Like Heimlich could have played Minecraft. Like that's how long he was alive. Like he does all of these like analogies where you're like, what?
That's crazy.
How can that be a thing? Yeah. It's really cool.
That's like the pyramids in Egypt being more ancient to Cleopatra than Cleopatra is to us.
Yes.
Kind of thing, right?
Oh yes, that was another one the other day. Which was that people in 1980 were the same distance from World War II as we are to 1980.
Wow. Yeah. What the...
I know.
Man.
And I think what's so interesting about that is because, like, we're all 17 in our head, right? Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah.
You hit puberty and it doesn't matter how old your meat sack gets. Like,
yeah, precisely. I'm glad to know I'm not the only one. I definitely feel like I'm 17.
That's the human experience. Yeah. It's like as soon as you have awareness as an adult, you like, obviously you would develop emotionally and all that sort of stuff. But
we hope.
Everyone has no idea what they're doing. Like as soon as you realize that, life gets so much easier because like everyone's just making it up. Like,
we're all making it up. I did, for sure.
Making the best decision they can at the time. So it's always so confronting to like your ego when you hear statements like that because you're like, oh, I'm old. Like, hang on, but I'm like, it's still 2003, right? We're still like, senior formal, and like,
that's right. Yeah, people say like, 10 years ago, and I definitely think like, like 1998 or like 2001. Like, what are you talking about 10 years ago?
Oh man, when you like now that like I see on Instagram reels and stuff now, like kids are. There was one where a girl like had invented like I'm doing air quotes, video jokes on the radio, but like. She'd invented squats, and I was like,
excuse me.
Have you never heard of squats before?
Listen, kid.
Like we've been alive so long that all these trends that we thought were so cool when we were kids have become trendy again. It's like, no.
Oh yeah. And that's one of the big challenges with clothing, right? My wife and I talk about it all the time. That like, I don't even know, is what I'm wearing cool again? Is it? I don't even know. I'm disoriented.
Exactly. Or you walk past like shops that you used to shop at and you're like, oh, I would never wear that. Oh, no.
Right. Yeah. This looks horrible. Why is it so expensive?
Yeah. Well, actually, it was a big moment for me because one of the girls on my team's in her like early 20s and she was joking about something and I was like, Sash, I've hit that point where I've realized that like dominant media isn't made for me anymore. And that's a really confronting moment.
Yeah.
And like you start looking at like Instagram reels and like I occasionally jump on TikTok and stuff like that and I'm like, I don't find this funny anymore. Like,
wait, this isn't for me?
I don't understand this reference. Like, oh my God, no, it's happening. It's like this moment of existential dread of like, I'm reaching out, man.
Speaking of The Simpsons, there's a great episode when Grandpa and Lisa are both sitting at the kitchen table and Grandpa's like, it sucks being old. No one listens to you. And Lisa's like, it sucks being young. No one listens to you. And then Homer walks through the kitchen. He's like, I'm a middle-aged white male. Everybody listens to all my ideas, as he's eating like a can of nuts and gum or something like that.
Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah. If I ever do start a like Simpsons review podcast, Camille, will you be a regular guest on that for me?
Oh, 100%.
Perfect.
Actually, there's so many clever. Again, it's one of the reasons that I both love and hate social media. But one of the things I love about it is like just how clever people are with some ideas in it. And there's one on there. There's an account that's solely dedicated to Simpsons versus the Liberals, and just again things not making any sense here. Liberals in Australia are the Conservative Party.
Wait, what?
Yes. So the history of that makes sense. The Liberals were originally opposed to monarchy, so that's
okay.
They were actually progressive when the party first. Yeah, there's very much turned on the other way since then, and they're very sort of right wing at the moment, and so there's this. Is
that right wing for me or right wing for you?
Yeah, does it work in reverse on the other side of the sun?
Right, yeah. Toilet bowl turns. That's what decides it.
Exactly. The political ideologies definitely kind of translate. So that the account's called Simpsons versus the Liberals, and they just do the funniest. They select Simpsons scenes to turn into memes about like stuff that's happening in politics, and it's just so funny. They're so quick too. Like our New South Wales has a Liberal premier, and she resigned this week, and within an hour of the announcement, they were posting so much content. It was just like, don't you people have jobs? How do you have both the energy and time?
This is my job.
Yeah, exactly. It just blows my mind. But
that's the I live with my parents, so this is my job.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, because of the pandemic, right? I'm definitely not trying to speak ill of anybody in financial hardship, of course.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
But that's the kind of the situation a lot of us are in right now. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now, let me spin this, just do a hard cut here, Camille. If you still got the time, can I ask you some more questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hard cut to Waltzing Matilda.
You've been wanting to ask about this the whole time.
I have. I've been wanting to ask you about this for weeks, like since we first started talking about getting together to talk, because it's a tune that like gets played on pipe sometimes, so we've got an excuse for it there. And you're Australian, so what's up with this song? Is it like
where do we start?
When you were a baby being fed Vegemite direct from a squeezy bottle, were you listening to Waltzing Matilda? Is that how prevalent it is in Australian society?
It's definitely so. It's something everyone. It's one of those. Where do I start? Like I think a lot of every culture has its own mythology, right? Like its own, and like Australia's a very new culture, so like this is one of ours where early colonial settler culture has kind of been romanticized as this, this is the birthplace of Australian, quote unquote Australian.
Right. Yeah. So
people have been here for tens of thousands of years.
Yeah.
Before that.
Yeah.
But this is one of those ones that I don't know why this one in particular, and I actually think, because for those that don't know, so Waltzing Matilda, the elevator pitch for Waltzing Matilda is basically that it's a story about a criminal who steals a sheep and then drowns in a billabong, which is a dam, I guess, or like what would you guys call it, a lake or pond?
Well, I guess, is it a naturally formed body of water, or is it stopped up on purpose?
No, it's a
lake or a pond, I guess.
Yeah, it's a pond. Yeah. So basically, it's a
I never knew that.
Stealing a sheep.
I finally know. Okay, so a criminal stealing a sheep, drowning in water. So so you mean an Australian going about his normal day fell into some water, right? Is that what you're saying?
It's funny you say that, because there was a push for our national anthem is called Advance Australia Fair, and most people overseas wouldn't know it unless you've kind of heard it played very orchestrally at Olympics and stuff like that, because it's not the catchiest of anthems. And there was a massive push because it's very colonial. So the second and third verses, the second verse not so much. Third and fourth verses of Advance Australia Fair are very much about like Britannia rules the waves, and like it's very imperial sort of colonial themes to it. And so when there was a big push for republicanism a few years ago, there were a number of tunes floated as kind of like alternative national anthems, and Waltzing Matilda actually won every single poll for what our national anthem should be.
And did they not do that though? Is this like Bodie McBoatface, where like the people have spoken, but we're not actually going to do what they say?
Well, it was more. So we actually didn't become a republic. So
I see. Okay.
But it was just so funny that it probably was exactly that. Like just because Australians naturally take the piss, like stirring is a love language for us. So, but I think it was also just that like Waltzing Matilda does genuinely have such like Australian people love that song because it's so like when you're a kid you are like you do learn it in school.
Yeah.
Like you learn the national anthem, you learn others, but I was actually probably in a bit of a unique position because my dad loves like Australian and Irish folk songs, and so he plays the piano, and so he would often play tunes like this to make us sing the lyrics and stuff when we were sort of 3 and 4 years old. So like I've known these songs since before I can remember. And it's only kind of when you get to school and start like studying them that you realize what the lyrics are actually about, and it's that moment of like, oh. We were singing these stories about, there's some about like, convicts being landed on the beach and being lashed and like all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You've been sitting there singing this as a 6-year-old and then you kind of realise like, oh, hang on.
Kind of a ring around the rosies kind of situation.
Yeah,
where
but I'm talking about seriously. Like I copped, 50 lashes and like all this sort of stuff, full it what is it? The red ran into the blue. Like there's some very kind of graphic. And you're just like, what? Why was I singing this as a kid? But anyway. You just don't question it, I guess. But so no, Waltzing Matilda is a much loved part of, like, every Australian knows it. And it's funny. There's like that one and there's a couple of modern ones where if I hear them and I've been on an overseas trip for a while, I actually get a bit teary.
Get a little teary, huh? I know that like my buddy Swan went to a piping school years ago and there were some Australians there and he did tell me, it was like every day they're always like, play Waltzing Matilda, let's play Waltzing Matilda. Like they never got tired of it. It was just constantly Waltzing Matilda.
It's definitely, and I think it's just such a, like, it's genuinely a catchy tune, like, and it's a nice tune to play, and like it's an easy 4/4, and like it's a nice tune on pipes as well. It fits well within the octave, which a lot of folk tunes don't necessarily.
True.
So, how you got to do the horrible bloody octave jumping thing, or there'll be one false note and you can't make it work on the bagpipe scale and all that sort of stuff. So it's one of those ones that fits perfectly, and you can kind of. It's also one of the only Australian folk tunes that still maintains like popularity, I suppose, in terms of like there's a lot of Australian folk tunes where you kind of hear them, and if you know Australian folk tunes, you'll know what they are. So we play Australian sets and you kind of play them, and even in pubs now, like you can play sets of 3 or 4 tunes in a pub here, and you'll end with Waltzing Matilda and people will know that one, but not like any of the ones that came previously.
You just make sure that's your finisher then, though, right?
Yeah, always. Yeah, you got to come in on a strong finish, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So that's the thing. It's it's definitely a part of our culture.
Do you feel like there's a definitive recorded version? Like if you had to look at all of the, sort of publicly available professionally recorded versions that exist, and there are a lot.
Yeah.
Is there one that stands out to you that you really love?
No, I would say John Williams is he's a really famous
Star Wars. Yeah.
No, I was going to say I always get them wrong. John Williamson. So John Williams is the composer. John Williamson is the Australian. So he's like an Australian country singer, and he's massively famous here. He was very big into the late 80s and 90s. And he has a really beautiful country voice, and he does a version of it. But I think I only like that one so much because it's the one that I probably listened to the most growing up. So, so to me, that's and I'm sure there's some amazing versions of it. But to be honest, there's a lot of like modern Australian songs that are probably way more done, that kind of have more cultural capital, I guess, with Australians. So there's one that Peter Allen wrote called "I Still Call Australia Home" that gets a lot of play and kind of a lot of cover versions and stuff done of it. And it's a beautiful song, like really heartfelt. And that's one where if I hear that on the plane, like if it comes on my playlist, I'll start crying on the way home for an overseas trip. You feel like such an idiot because you're like, I know I'm just like tired and emotional. I've been stuck in a bloody tin can for 18 hours.
Yeah.
But like,
sometimes it feels good. You got to have that playlist ready because sometimes it's really good to cry. So go ahead and do it.
Get it out. Exactly. But there's one that most people overseas don't know, but it's by an Australian band called The Seekers. They were this fantastic like Australian folk band in the 60s and 70s, and they're still much beloved. But they wrote a song called "I Am Australian," and it's often considered like the definitive modern Australian folk song, I guess. But it's been attempted to be repurposed so many times, and actually it's one of the reasons I love them so much is when they first put it out, their big thing, and the one thing that they always said is that we will never license this for political use. So no one can ever change this from being, basically just a part of the heart of Australia.
That was smart of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's been so many times it's been used at political rallies and things.
One can imagine.
Straight onto it. Yeah, totally. Because they said like we do not want the intent to be twisted to that. Like it needs to stay pure. Yeah, but it's a very good tune as well. So.
I maybe don't know the right groups. I'm just thinking of like sort of like folk music from Australia. I am thinking about one group that I listened to a lot in high school called Yothu Yindi. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah. So they're an Indigenous band. They were really big here in like the 90s.
Yeah.
And Treaty was one of
Treaty. Yeah, they had a radio edit of Treaty that was a big deal.
So that was when Indigenous people here were fighting for land rights and things like that. So they were pushing for treaty. And it's actually an interesting aside. The Indigenous people in Australia have recently been pushing for another treaty, which has been an interesting political thing to watch unfold. So Yothu Yindi were really good. Men at Work are kind of options,
of course,
which is funny because like so many of these, and it's interesting actually tying it back to the bagpipes, that so many of these like famous Australian rock bands have Scottish lead singers.
Yeah.
So I think the lead singer of Men at Work is a Scottish bloke. Jimmy Barnes, who's one of Australia's biggest rock singers, who was the head of Cold Chisel. They're a big band here, so he's Scottish, and he's actually just started learning the bagpipes, and it's atrocious.
Oh.
he's obviously a learner, but he'll get on and like record these videos of him playing it, and as the bagpipe, you're kind of listening to it and just cringing, and you're like, thank you for giving it a go, Jimmy, but that's not what bagpipes sound like.
Well, he's trying though. Good for him for trying. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Well, he's given it a go and trying to tie back to his heritage. And
yeah,
so good on him. Yeah, but
do you know the band called Brother? That's out of is it Bathurst?
Bathurst is in
Bathurst.
Oh god, is that Victoria or New South Wales? My Australian geography can be terrible at times.
They've got it's better than mine. I was going to say Australia's got like 2 cities, right? There's Queen. It's Sydney and
I had to have this argument with a mate from the US the other day. So Australia is the same size geographically as the continental United States.
Really?
So, yes.
I thought it was smaller.
No, the map makes it look different, and I think with Alaska and Hawaii, you guys like just slightly pip us at the post in terms of actual geographical area. But yeah, Australia as a country is exactly the same size. Well, very similarly sized to the continental United States.
Well, it's freaking huge then.
Yeah,
I hear people talk about
place.
going from what is it? One of the cities is that one of the big places is down south and one is like northeast, right? Is that, or have I got that turned around somehow?
No, you're right. So there's basically most of the population live along the coastline, because the middle of the country is like an arid desert. So. And that's where kind of all the jokes come from about Australia being so hot and all that sort of stuff. And Australia is a hot country, like it very rarely snows here, apart from parts in the very remote south, but and mountains and stuff like that. But the major cities are kind of peppered along the state. So we only have 6 states and 2 territories.
So a place as big as the country I'm sitting in right now, but only 6 states?
6 states and 2 territories, but we have a 10th of your population. So we're a much smaller country in terms of people as well. Yeah. So... and we're basically spread out along the coastline. So the only major city in the west is Perth, which is on the western, southwestern coast. Yeah. And then all of the other major cities are in the, like state capitals and things like that, but along the coast up the eastern seaboard. So from Tasmania, which is kind of the island at the bottom, then Melbourne's kind of right at the bottom southeast. Sydney's sort of... middle southeast coast. Brisbane, where I live, is kind of middle northeast coast. And then you get some of the bigger cities peppered up towards the top. So Melbourne and Sydney are kind of the ones that people know. Canberra is actually a capital, which is just in from Sydney. And then the Darwin in the north is kind of like, they're kind of like the Florida of Australia, I think. With like, if anyone...
I'm glad you guys have a Florida. That's great.
I think people often, I was talking to the boys in Vegas about it, but like Brisbane is kind of like, if you had to draw an equivalent, Brisbane probably like in Queensland is more like the Wild West. So we've got more of like your, authority, shirking kind of like that sort of mentality up north here. And then down south is probably more like your like northeastern states. So they're a bit more, cosmopolitan and whatever. But yeah, if you're up for a good read, have a look at the NT News, so the Northern Territory News. They're a legitimate newspaper, and their headlines give you. They're basically, you'll see what I mean when I say the Florida of Australia.
It's like our Florida man thing, huh? Like and 100%. I don't mean any offense, but like I might have somewhat flippantly said something like Australia is the Florida of the world. So to know that there's distinctions there within as well is good for me. I'm becoming more culturally rich as we talk, so that's good.
I'll let you know the secret, James. Australians generally are pretty hard to offend. So say whatever you like, and in general, it doesn't bother us.
Well, so that makes more sense because I have got this sense of like people like sort of like complaining or making a big deal of having to travel to and from Perth from other places, and just being like, what? It's one island. Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
No, it's a continent. I got to remember that. And it's a big one too. So
Perth is the equivalent of from, I think we worked out from Los Angeles to New York to fly.
So it's pretty dang far.
From Sydney or Brisbane, so it's like 6.5 hours.
And it's across just basically desert wasteland, it sounds like.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
lots of like big farming properties and stuff as well,
Yeah, yeah.
sheep and cattle farming, and like big, like, you know, sugarcane and wheat plantations and stuff like that here too. But yeah, mostly just giant desert, big red desert in the middle of the country here.
Huh. Now, Camille, I know that you picked up the banjo a little while ago.
I did, yeah.
Are you still doing that, or is it fallen by the wayside?
Very sporadically. I do still. So I got as far as sort of doing some rolls and things like that. I was actually going to do it in conjunction with Andy. Kind of challenged me. So Andy Fusco was going to learn uilleann pipes because he had a set sitting in the same sort of thing as me. I'd bought a banjo ages ago, never got into it. So we kind of tried to G each other up to, hey, you do this and I'll do this. And then he broke his reed and couldn't get another one.
Oh, yeah.
So the motivation with having like an accountability side there, unfortunately, but I do still pick it up every now and then. My nephew's actually obsessed with it. He loves drumming on the skin while I'm sort of doing rolls and stuff, so which is quite cute. So I often pull it out to play with him, but I have to be honest, I haven't in earnest been doing it. I've been a bit busy with and I think it's, you know, that's an excuse because you prioritize what you are interested in.
Well, but you put out a book recently. I mean, you've got...
I was going to say, I've been a bit busy with freelance, like full-time work, writing a book and learning to play the bagpipes.
Yeah, you're busy with other stuff. It's justified.
There's a lot of things going on. But yeah, no, I still do love it. I'd love to, you know, it's that classic thing of when you start learning pipes too, right, where you kind of listen to music that you love. So I love Mumford and Sons. They're one of my favourite bands.
Oh, yeah, love them.
And early stuff too, where kind of, you know, they had the banjo as a big band. I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to be able to play that, you know, or whatever. And then you kind of get into the, you know, learning videos and it's like, now play this roll, ding, ding, ding. And you're like, oh.
This isn't what I wanted.
I know what I'm in for because I've learned it like an instrument as an adult with the pipes, but I know this is going to be a bloody journey and take a lot of work and effort. So to be honest, I've only been dallying in it recently. There's
a local artist who does sort of like I think they're called tintypes, those like engraving images.
Cool. Yeah.
And he did he doctored this. There's this old engraved image of the 4 riders of the apocalypse, or is it 5? How many are coming for the apocalypse? I forget.
There's 4.
Yeah, the 4 horsemen, right? Yeah. And he calls the piece the 4 riders of the atonal apocalypse, and it looks just the same. But if you look carefully, you'll see that one of them is holding drumsticks, one is playing a banjo, one playing bagpipes, and one playing the accordion.
Amazing.
So you are halfway through the list, Camille. So.
Well, I haven't been interested in picking up the snare drum, so
there you go. Drum will be next. Finish it off with the accordion, and you'll be...
I can tick off all the list.
Yep, that's right. Now...
I'll add that to the list.
How much... how long can I keep you, Camille? Are we pushing the limit at this point?
No, it's Sunday morning here. I got all the time in the world.
That's right. How's the future? Is the future nice?
Yeah, it's pretty bright here. It's getting a bit warm. It's coming into our summer, so...
Yeah.
It's going to be hotter than the face of the sun in a few months' time, but it's that sweet spot of like the shoulder season at the moment. So
it's so funny.
Here.
It's so funny that we're humans on the same planet, because for me it's Saturday afternoon. I still have some yard work to do because I'm cleaning stuff up to get ready for winter. You know, like the snow is starting to come down on the mountains. The leaves are starting to die. But we're here at the same time. It's a simple thing, but it blows my mind.
No, it is, and I think it's one of those things too, where like video chatting and like being able to call, like, you know, I've got a lot of friends in the US now, and so, you know, I'll catch up with them, you know, by text, you know, every day, but like, you know, you kind of call them once a week on the weekend and whatever, and just like you'll see them and they'll be wearing like full jumpers, and,
right?
like,
yeah,
you know, sweaters, I guess you call them, and like, you know, you're sitting there sweating in a tank top, and you're like, you're like, how is this the same? Or like they're bitching about, like, you know, I had to shovel snow today, or like, you know,
right, yeah.
And you're like, what? Like I'm desperately trying to sit in the aircon and avoid like going to the shop so I don't have to go out and burn myself wearing a belt and touching the steering wheel because it's so hot here.
It's so funny. I love. I've got a friend who lives in Japan, and I love like just calling him like near sunset here, and just being like, "Hey, what does the sun look like over there?" You know, just tell me about it. It's just interesting.
It is. It's a weird feeling. But it's bright and sunny here, so it's just gone 9:30 in the morning. So yeah.
Now, Camille, it is good that Australians aren't easily offended, but what about New Zealanders? Because I want to know from you, an Australian, what is the beef between New Zealand and Australia?
It's an interesting thing, you know, like Kiwis and Aussies. We've got.
Are you allowed to say Kiwis? Because see, I would have said Kiwis instead of New Zealanders, but I didn't know if I was allowed to say that.
No, I think you're allowed to say Kiwis.
Okay.
So I think Kiwis generally are pretty much the same. So we've got very similar cultures actually, in that we tend to be quite irreverent and take the piss, and humility is a big part of our culture, so we call it tall poppy syndrome. We're kind of trying to, tear people down if they get too big an ego. And all that
right,
sort of
yeah.
big thing here. So, taking risks and, staring and all that sort of stuff is a big part of both cultures. But, I think, like, Kiwi, we always joke that the Kiwis have little brother syndrome. So, they're kind of like, they're like we almost joke, and actually there was a movement when Australia became a federation that they should be the seventh state. So, and then they became their own country. So, they're very closely aligned, very closely settled. So, same, mostly are British, UK kind of settled from overseas. Mm-hmm. In terms of the beef, I think it's more just like a good-natured ribbing thing. So
is that what it is?
Like, so we're both kind of like colonial, offshoots down in the southern hemisphere, kind of out on this little limb together. And to be honest, I think it's probably more pronounced in Kiwi culture than Australian culture. So we love giving them credit, but I think it's a little bit sensitive on their side.
I see.
Whenever you see like Kiwi shows and stuff like that, they always make a big deal about, like, whenever an Australian's mentioned, they're like, oh, bloody Australians. Like, they always joke that we're these like arrogant, big city kind of types. That,
right. Yeah.
Think too much of ourselves, and they're kind of like the humble, like, underdogs, whereas for us it's kind of like, Kiwis are all sheep shaggers or whatever. We just take the piss out of them being these like yokel kind of, island people with two heads sort of thing. So,
right.
But it's all very good natured. Like, I've got a bunch of Kiwi friends who are like the best. Like, they're just great people. Do
you have bagpiping friends over there? Because from what I understand, there's a pretty strong piping tradition on both chunks of land, right?
Yeah, I would argue, in fact, that New Zealand has a much stronger piping. And I'm probably going to get bloody eviscerated for that if any Australian pipers hear that. But but New Zealand definitely has better bands. So they have a number of great bands that kind of go over and compete at the world.
Right, we hear about those, yeah.
Yeah, and they're excellent. So they have a really strong tradition. I think actually part of the reason for that is that they had a huge Scottish settlement on the South Island, which is... so if you know anything about the shape of New Zealand, which probably a lot of your listeners don't, but it's kind of like, think about like an exclamation point, but in reverse. So, and kind of chubby. So like the bottom,
chubby upside down exclamation point.
Island is kind of, it's the bottom long island is Middle Earth basically. So that's
what I was going to say. Like I have a map of Middle Earth right here on my wall. You don't even have to tell me.
So the bottom island, so the South Island is Middle Earth, and then there's a very small island off the base of that, and then the top island is kind of like the cosmopolitan part of New Zealand where all of their like major cities and towns are. And so the bottom island is South Island, I should say, is a lot of like farming communities, and then a few sort of medium-sized cities. But the bottom island is South. I keep saying bottom island. South Island is where a lot of Scottish people settle, and that's where a big part of the New Zealand piping scene is. And I think that's because just a lot of these like Scottish families, similar to parts of Canada, right, where it's like Nova Scotia and those sort of places where pipings kind of thrive, where the settlers came over and taught it, and then it thrived from there. So whereas in Australia, Scottish settlement was much more disparate. So I think that was probably a big part of it. Sorry, my neighbour's just turned on his bloody leaf blower, so we're probably going to cough a lot of background noise.
It's all right.
But to be honest, personally, I don't actually know too many New Zealand pipers. The only New Zealand pipers I know are ones I've met through the dojo, or who live in Australia. So because the two, even though New Zealand's only a 3-hour flight from here, we actually don't travel there. So I've actually never visited New Zealand myself.
Really?
It's on my list, it's on my list to go to. But I think it's that classic thing of like, there's actually big parts of Australia that I've never been to that I'd love to go to, like Uluru and, a few very famous places like that. And I often joke to people overseas that like, you probably see more of Australia than I have.
Oh, sure. Kind of like
as a tourist, like,
right. Like people, like my neighbors probably haven't seen the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of thing.
Like being never like, you never kind of see the big stuff.
Well, you figure you will eventually or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just something you'll get to and never kind of get straight onto. So, but so I don't actually know many New Zealand bands, but there are a lot of pipers who play sort of in the Queensland, like where I play, so in Pipe Bands Queensland, that sort of thing. There's about 12 or 13 bands kind of locally who compete regularly at sort of our competition season, and most of the better players in those bands go over to New Zealand for their championships every year. So there's definitely a strong connection. I just personally have never kind of done it. So yeah.
I see. Now, Camille, I'm curious, and it probably would have been more fair for me to give you some time to prep for this, but it's just I want to ask you about this. Like we talked about how like Waltzing Matilda is kind of like that sort of like colonial heritage thing, Yeah, I'm always going to bring it back to Waltzing Matilda, right? So like I'm thinking about this. There's this local guy who I like listening to. He's got some podcasts and stuff like that, and he talks about like social technologies. Mm-hmm. How like we need the family technology and we need it to do these things for us. And so when that technology breaks down, we have these problems and we have to find other ways to fix it, right? And one of these things that he talks about is this idea of a sort of an ancestry technology. Like we all want to have some sort of lineage, some sort of story, and of course we want it to be positive.
Yeah.
and so like he uses this to kind of explain, like, you know, for people who might have a hard time understanding how people in the southern United States could be so adamant about hanging on to what to me seems like the wrong idea of what the now I can't remember my own words, the Confederate flag means in the southern United States. Yeah. He suggests that like maybe a more charitable or understanding view would be like, you know, like let's not hold up racist symbology, of course, but if these people need to have their ancestry technology be something, right, it needs to do something for them. Yeah, it can be very difficult to have a negative story and have that be your only option. And so it might be a very human thing to seek a way of finding a story and making it positive as well. Yeah, I'm probably doing a bad job explaining that, but
no, it's interesting you say that actually, because it's that classic thing of like, and that's actually a common psychology trope that they teach to people with anxiety and stuff like that, is that like everyone is the main character of their own story.
Oh yeah,
so most of the time people aren't even thinking about you because they're too busy thinking about their own story, right?
Yeah.
So, like people who are worried too much about like what other people think of them, it's like this big like, yeah, no one is thinking about you because everyone's thinking about themselves. Yeah. But it's interesting you say that, because I think it's more a romanticization, because we definitely have that here. So there's like there's convict Australian heritage and settler Australian heritage.
Yeah.
And like it's actually an interesting like parallel, because people from Adelaide and South Australia is called the Free State in Australia because that's the only one that was only settled by settlers, free settlers.
I see.
Whereas most of the rest of Australia was colonised effectively by convicts who served out their time and then stayed in the colonies. So,
honestly, I thought the latter was the only way white people got into Australia at all. So that's news to me.
Yeah, no, actually there's been a lot of like waves of immigration. We actually had a thing called was it a 2 pound or 4 pound? I think it was 4 pound pom. So pom is a like slang term for British person, and so like in the early 1900s they had this thing horrifically called the White Australia policy, which the government at the time basically wanted to bring white people over to preserve the purity of the Australian colony, dear. Basically, yeah.
That anytime fun. Yeah. Speaking
of, trying to light on any of it.
Yeah, my goodness.
Just like, okay.
Anytime you're making like political policy and the word purity comes up, you gotta stop for a second, think hard.
Remember, this was around like before any of like the World War II stuff had happened, or eugenics was actually still considered like an emerging thought and all that sort of stuff. So in context, I mean, it doesn't make it forgivable at all, but it definitely makes it more understandable how it all happened. But so they had these things called 4 pound poms, and the idea was that I think it was 4 pounds anyway, it was something pound pom, but they basically put out a call out to people in Britain and basically said like it was not very much, so it would have been the equivalent of like $50 in Australian money, or $20 in American money today. Now,
was Australian money still gin? Because I know that for a while was that still a thing or not? By that, had you moved on to coinage by then?
That's definitely a legitimate, like if you play a gig here and someone offers you a bottle of whiskey or something, that's not something you'd definitely turn your nose up at. So it's a legitimate form of currency. But no, so they tried to get free settlers out. So basically they wanted to inject the number of migrants they had with the right kind of migrants. That was their big thing. So they had these 4 pound poms or whatever, where these families would pay literally $4 at the time and come to Australia to live. So there's been big waves of sort of free settler migration, but the convicts during the 1800s basically would be transported from the UK out of their jails for often very minor things, like literally stealing was something that you could be transported for. So you can imagine as like a young, like starving, Irish man or woman, you could be in prison for something that today we would kind of just, you get a rap on the hand for or whatever, and do a bit of community service, but they would literally be put in prison and then transported on a ship for several months over rough seas to the other side of the planet. to live in grueling conditions for a few years until you kind of did your time and, you know, served your moral purpose or whatever. And then
now come back, because
exactly.
you'll surely be a great citizen of the country now.
Well, the idea was that, like, basically Australia was better. Like, it was this emerging place where your criminal conviction didn't, you know, mean that you were subject to stigmatization in a class society. So basically you could make your own life here. So similar, I suppose, to the American frontiers in that way, where people, and then we had the gold rushes and things, so they found different mineral deposits that people got excited about and that sort of thing. But so in Australia we have that thing where kind of like you're either a free settler descendant or a convict descendant. But even the convict descendants, like, any of that stuff is very romanticized here. So it's probably very similar to the Confederacy stuff for you guys, where, you know, criminals are, well, Waltzing Matilda is a perfect example of, like, criminals being romanticized, right? Of like, you know, a whole ballad was written about this guy who's basically the scraggly, you know, drifter who steals a sheep off a farmer's property and gets killed for it. But we have, like, bushrangers, so they were kind of like highwaymen, I guess, who were like bad guys basically, but they were painted as these Robin Hood types, even though at the time they were probably just, you know, organised gangs of violent youths who are, you know, fighting to get money and fighting against probably a very corrupt, you know, British-led government at the time. But,
probably bad guys fighting bad guys, not so much.
So
not so much Robin Hood.
But it's this very romanticized thing of, like, you know, the ballads of Ned Kelly and, you know, Captain Starlight and, like, all of these, like, they were almost the superheroes of the time who were kind of standing up to authority. And then, you know, people who are descended from them talk up about, you know, oh, well, I'm a direct descendant of Ned Kelly. Like, or, you know, Ned Kelly's secret love child was my great-great-grandfather, and, like, all this sort of stuff. And you're like, really? Like, but it's that need to be connected to something, I think. And it does tie interestingly back to the bagpipes and that whole...
Well, that's why I wondered about it, because I feel like maybe we experience something similar. You being where you are and me where I am, where, like, I don't have to look very far in my own, like, sort of personal heritage to find a lot of mistreatment of Native people, a lot of misplacement of Native people. I'm living on land that was taken by other people from... Yeah, absolutely, right? And so it's like, I want to acknowledge that. That's not great, right? You know? But, like, there's surely something deep down inside of me that is seeking for some sort of positive story, you know, to spin about, like, how I got to where I am. And so I'm not saying it's good to ignore the ugly parts, but I wonder if to some degree the bagpipes end up being something like a vehicle, right, to carry me back to a different landmass and a different time, so I don't have to think so much about the more difficult problems that are right in front of me. Is that part of the mythologizing effect? I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little too loopy on this, but
no, I think you've definitely got to. I think for some people, definitely it is, and that's an interesting. I've personally, and I think Australia generally, we don't, like, tend to identify with a heritage, or white Australians don't for the most part generally. That's definitely true. Not to the extent that Americans do, I think, from what I've experienced. So, like, Americans to me seem more likely to say, like, I'm Irish American, or I'm Italian American, or I'm Scottish. But they won't even say American, right? Like, sometimes they'll just say, like, I'm Scottish. And
yes.
You're not, though.
Never been there.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Like, and, like, in America too, because it's been a country for so much longer, like
right,
it was, like, literally 8 generations ago that you had
we do really want hyphens, though, as Americans. We all like, but what kind of American are you,
what
right?
What did they call them in Zoolander? It was, like, slashy. Like,
right.
like to be a slashy.
Yeah, we love being slashies.
Irish / American. But in Australia, that's not really a thing. So, like, someone might say to you, like, what's your heritage? And be like, oh, well, you know, like, 5 generations back, my, you know, grandmother was, my family was Irish. So for me, example, I'm a Australian, sort of, I think 5 generations removed. So, and I called myself an Australian. Like, I wouldn't think of myself ever as being from anywhere but here, because my identity is very Australian. And so for me, playing the bagpipes was just kind of like a fun novelty, and I really like the music. And so for that reason, I don't feel particularly, and I obviously have no Scottish heritage either, so I don't feel particularly connected to them through a family lineage or any of that sort of romanticized stuff, but I can see very easily how you could be, like, how that could be something where I think you're exactly right, that people love to have that personal mythology and that personal lineage and feel like you're, like, you know, personally tied together, because I think fundamentally as humans, we all want to feel special.
Yeah, absolutely.
Part of our ego is that we and not just that, but, like, in our generation particularly, we've been fed content, and like every generation where there's been...
Don't say something culture. Bad about our generation, Camille. Come on. We're perfect. We've got it figured out.
But it's that whole, like, what do they say? There's like 7 archetypal stories, and like the hero's journey is one of the most popular ones, right?
Yeah.
But it's for a reason. It's because everyone thinks they're a hero. Like, everyone wants to be the hero. And so even if you physically or intellectually or through your interests or through your personality are very much like a sidekick kind of character, even though no one is any of those things, because everyone is a 3-dimensional human being who would never fit into the archetype of any of those things, and that's what makes life so interesting. But people tend to cast themselves into these different roles in a story, and so you are always the hero of your own story, and that's why so many relationships break down, because both parties think that they're the hero.
Both are the hero. So, why aren't you being a sidekick, dagnabbit? I'm the hero.
Exactly. Or even gender roles and stuff like that too. Or people of colour, or people with disabilities, or people with diverse sexualities who have never seen themselves represented in those situations, and so they have to cast themselves, through a very, filtered lens or whatever. But like, it's just really interesting to me that, like, that internalizes. Of course it does, because that's what we consume all the time through media. Is like, that there's all of these stories where there's a hero, and like the hero gets, all of these benefits and has this like a massive personal growth and has a payoff, and like whatever that is, like, whether it's, girls or money or whatever, like the hero, everyone wants to be that because you get something out of it, even if it's just the ego indulgence of everyone loving you. And so because of that, people want to feel special. And so they feel almost like they're owed that. And so that's why you often get people coming up to you at a games or something like that, and like they'll be saying like, oh, what kilt do you wear? And you're like, oh, this is McNeil Barra because that's what my band wears. And they're like, oh, is that your family one? I'm like, no. And then they're like, oh, my family wears such and such. And you realise the whole question was just like a segue into them telling you about them stuff. And it's like, dude, I don't care. Like genuinely, I couldn't give a fuck, but I'm happy to be polite because you obviously want to talk about it. But like, it's just that, like, what in that person's brain made them think that they should come up to someone and speak to them. And obviously it's because you're wearing something that they identify with and they want to share that with you. Yeah. But their way of sharing that is trying to position themselves as special because of how they are adjacent to that culture. Right. They have the broadest Australian accent. And, and you're just like, yeah, but you're not though.
But you're not, exactly.
So I think that it's just inherently people want to feel special, and everyone does. Like, that's just a human nature thing. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, it ties back to that whole, if you have a mystical lineage and like somehow this connects you to it. It cracks me up actually talking about the uniform, and like my very first episode on the Chanter Out with Josh and Andy was talking about the uniform and like basically just tearing it to shreds because I do hate the uniform. Yeah. Well, you don't like wearing men's clothing? Yeah. Well, that for a start, but also just the uniform itself is so ridiculous, right? Like, yeah. And it's interesting, actually. I saw a friend post recently about she was planning to wear her Glengarry for like a wacky hat day at her work that they're having. And she'd said like, do you think this is a good choice? And she was obviously being quite, what do you call it? Trying to be funny. Yeah. And someone had posted on there like, oh, the Glengarry is not wacky at all, like not appropriate at all. Like it's so sacred. And it was like this really like reverent, like, the Glen is, when you feel the breeze flapping, that's what I mean. And I was just reading this just going like, what? Like, I put on the Glengarry and I hear the voices of my ancestors singing in my ears. Sounds like Celtic woman. But it serves no, like, especially for an Australian, I'm like, give me a functional hat, mate. Like, if I've got to wear one, I want something that's going to keep the bloody sun off me, because that thing, or at least not be like thick wool to keep all the heat inside. Oh my God. No shade. Well, our competition season is usually during summer, right? So, in summer here, it can be easily 40 degrees, which is what do you mean by that? So between 100 and 110 for most of summer, and humid too, where I'm from. So, like, I want something that's actually going to give me some sun protection. Yeah. Not this, and, the whole uniform itself is so interesting, because as I've gotten more interest in pipes and learning more about it, like, the uniform itself is entirely made up. Like, it's not some historical traditional thing that like the great Highland pipers of coloured and were wearing. Right. Like, we imagine like the McCrimmons standing on a mountain inventing Pembroke wearing exactly what we wear. Like, no, I don't think so. Or probably number ones, with, absolutely. Yeah, the regimental, the red coat and the feather bonnet, Yeah, can you imagine anyone bloody in the jig? Yep, this is what I wear every day. That era wearing a red coat? Like, oh, seriously. Aside from, absolutely. Yeah, but like, I just can't even wrap my head around this idea, because it was invented by a bunch of actually British, like English blokes who like formed the London Society in the 1800s. So like it doesn't have this like mystical history that people think it does, but
we give it one.
Yeah, but what interests me is that they don't want to dig far enough to find that out. Like it's almost like and it's that classic thing, similar with the Confederacy stuff, I guess, of like if people actually confronted that, they would be appalled to be associated with it. But like, and not to mention the fact that it wasn't really around for like 4 years or something. Like the Confederacy itself was really small time period that people.
And the flag itself wasn't even like a national flag. It was like a marching flag for like one group out of Virginia or something. I can't remember now, but people have
just described this meaning to it. But isn't that interesting that people do that? Like that they don't want to know more about it because they want the mythology to be preserved, because the more you know, like people ruin everything. So like the more you know about something, the more you realize that these people that you're romanticizing aren't the heroes from the movies. They're just horrible, that's flawed human beings that we all are. Like,
and that's exactly where I wonder. Like, I don't have a conclusion on this. I think about it for myself all the time. Like, is that then, if you recognize that these people have problems, or that the history is problematic or anything like that, does that then ruin your lineage technology, right?
Yeah.
And so then it does something to you personally. It harms your ego or something, So you want to.
I think it definitely. Well, and this is what frustrates me, because that's the sort of thing that I love breaking down, because it's like if you can't break that stuff down, how fragile is your core? That you don't have those fundamental core beliefs about yourself that will stand up to any scrutiny. Like if you can't even look at them and scrutinize them yourself, how on earth can you know who you are as a person? So people who cling to these kind of quite fragile, bits and pieces, of mythology and that sort of thing, or romanticize stuff that isn't true, and build it up to be something that it's not, because someone said it once and then someone else said it and then it just became what it is. Like like how on earth can you not want to question that? Because I feel like you're exactly right. Like the ego hit that comes from that, of realizing like, like seeing yourself as you perceive other people will see you. And it's very confronting, like where you kind of look at that and you go like, oh, like, wow, other people might think that I'm this or that. That's one of the reasons, actually, complete tangent, but that I don't like to, I like to have people who have different ideologies and thoughts to me on my Facebook feeds. You don't like getting into an echo chamber, huh? No, the echo chamber is so harmful, I think. And like honestly, sometimes I do mute people who are like so vocally like opposite to me that it makes me actually angry, and I'm like, my blood pressure's going up, like trying not to comment on this so bad. Like just mute them for 30 days just so I can build up some resiliency again. But I think it's so important to always question what you believe, because otherwise you do build up a mythology, and then that can actually potentially be quite harmful over time, as we've seen from, the rise in whatever it is, like domestic terrorism in the US and here too, like we've had it as well. It seems to have been very polarizing in the last few years, like it's hit a real tinderbox moment in the pandemic, I think, when everyone's been stressed out, being locked inside and all that sort of stuff. Stressor on top of stressor and stuff. Totally. All these other social issues come to the fore. It's really interesting. Yeah. Man, well, let's get you started on another book, Camille. What kind of how interested are you in psychology and pull your I'm a bit with psychology like you are with history, though, where I'm fascinated by it, but I'm such an armchair enthusiast with it. So I have no formal training other than a couple of very basic modules I did as part of my education degree. But I do find psychology fascinating. I find people fascinating, like group dynamics and the way that people interact and the relationships that they have with each other, really interesting. So I like to see how that influences, particularly for pipes, like how people learn and how people stay motivated, and trying to use that as a positive thing. So figuring out manipulation, for want of a better word, but how you can exploit psychology to make people more interested in playing and continuing to play, and how you keep people interested in staying in and growing a community so that it thrives. So, well, it seems like studies in archaeology could be somewhat informing some of these interests that you have as well. Do you feel like totally. that interest and also your formal training has an effect on you? Because you do some leadership stuff with your band, right? Yeah, so excuse me. So I'm pipe sergeant in my band. I was pipe major for a couple of months, so then I managed to find someone and convince him that he should do it. You weaseled your way out of that one, huh? I did. It's so funny because everyone's like, why would you want to be pipe major? And I'm like, you have nothing to do with bagpipes. That's why you're asking the question. Like, no one wants to be the pipe major. It's the worst job. And thankfully Owen took it on. But so I'm the president of my pipe band, and I'm also the pipe sergeant, and I tutor. So I basically run the thing and manage gigs and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And that was my agreement with Owen in coming in. He's a very good piper, but I'd basically said to him, like, I'll do all of the organisational stuff because that's what I'm good at. You do all the music stuff, and then we'll meet in the middle and form a perfect partnership. And it's been working really well for a couple of years. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So do you feel like you see a lot of crossover between your pipe band life and your interests life and your professional life and stuff like that, or is it all in neat boxes? Yeah,
no, definitely. Like, nothing exists in a vacuum, right? And I'm definitely not one of those, but like I feel like the more knowledge that you have, the more that you should share it for a start. With people who are willing to listen to it. Obviously, I don't think you should just start, running around screaming advice at people like a crazy person. But it's interesting actually how much they've merged over time. So like I used to be very much kind of like, I do piping as a hobby and I work, at the time it was for like a publisher and all this sort of stuff. And then kind of over the last few years even, just you meet people and kind of pipe bands, I've often joked, are kind of like, I don't know, the Masons or something. Like you meet people
so true.
Different walks of life, and it's such a secret society to the point where actually it was interesting. Like I was walking through the uni, so 2 stories actually. I was walking through the uni one day, and the very senior kind of executive of one of the institutes at the uni like stopped me and said, "Oh, hi Camille, are you doing such and such?" I was walking with another girl from work. She's like, "How on earth do you know Neville?" I'm like, "Oh, he's a piper." And she was just like, "What? Like, how are you as like a middle level manager kind of talking to the executives from an institute that like has nothing to do with this really?" It's like,
right.
So you just know all these random people from around the place from, every walk of life. But then another funny story. So I during the pandemic, so everything was in strict lockdowns here. I don't know what you guys had there, but basically you couldn't leave your house and the police would fine you if they kind of came across you and you were leaving home for a non-essential reason. Yeah,
I think that we've made attempts at that. Too many people have guns. I think we couldn't go quite so far, but
kind of works against you in that situation, I guess, yeah. But I mean, it worked for us. Like we've got 0 COVID at the moment, which is good.
Yeah, lucky.
But yeah, I know we've been very lucky, trust me. So at the time it was like strict lockdown. So I had to drive from my house, which is about 40 minutes away from where I work. So I had to drive for 40 minutes. That was a bit nerve-wracking because I wasn't really supposed to be there. But it was to film an Anzac Day video. So Anzac Day for us is like Veterans Day for you guys, I guess.
Oh, okay.
And so it was doing a bit of like we have a tradition here as part of that where you play at sunrise, so it's usually a bugle, or you play Flowers of the Forest on pipes at a dawn service. And so we were recording a few days before before Anzac Day, to get some drone footage of me playing as the sun rose. So it was like really early in the morning, like I'm talking like 4:30 a.m. And so I've headed out to work, and it's a sandstone university. So if you picture like one of the American Ivy League kind of places with these beautiful big kind of quadrangles with sandstone and stuff like that. So I'm standing in the middle of this, so I was just sitting there warming up. The pipes and all that sort of stuff, and then this guy randomly walks across, and he was like a cleaner at the uni, but he's like, "Oh, what band do you play for?" And I'm like, "Oh, I play for Brisbane, City of Brisbane." And he's like, "Oh, I play for Clan Stewart." I'm like, "What are the chances that like the one other guy during a global pandemic,
right,
on
who's
a
out
university campus would be a bagpiper?" Like it's just nuts. Like we literally are just everywhere. It's crazy. Yeah, well, it is like we do have like sort of like sets of sort of symbology, sort of private language, vocabulary. We just need to develop some some pipe band specific handshakes, and exactly. We'll be there. We'll be right there with the Masons. Rituals, yeah, exactly. And then we need to exclude some people.
That's important too. Yep.
Figure out which groups to exclude. Yeah.
Well,
we've definitely made it as a secret society. If we do that, I think.
Well, I think it might be fair to say that we as a pipe band, a larger sort of pipe band society, maybe we've already achieved that, and it's breaking down. I mean, it's been hard for women to get into pipe bands before, for example. So maybe we've already been there. We were a very mature secret society.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Actually, we're getting there.
Oh well.
But so it was interesting actually how much that crossover between sort of what I do with piping and work has kind of come together. Yeah. So when I said the secret society thing, so a bloke I met through doing the Chanter podcast actually, and kind of being on that. So I met a whole bunch of people who kind of added me or started talking to me as part of that process, which was great actually, because I made a whole bunch of new friends and new connections, which is always good, and you kind of meet new people and find out new things. But one of them was a bloke I've become quite good friends with, but he lives in Perth, and he was with the National Association at the time, and he dobbed me into the head of our Queensland Association to say, you should get in touch with this girl because she can do like websites and content and media stuff and communications. And so he sort of tapped me on the shoulder and said, like, basically, would you be interested in doing this for us? So then I got roped into doing that. And then through that, I've met some other people, which has led to more freelance work and all sort of. So it's just interesting how you should never say no to an opportunity, because everything kind of feeds in. So I definitely don't try and keep things separate, because it always leads to more opportunities. So
well, the book with Andrew Douglas seems like a perfect example.
Yeah, and it's just fascinating to me, like how it's almost like I'm an atheist personally, so like I'll just out myself on that. But like I don't believe in fate or any of those sorts of things. But it's always really interesting to me how like all of this stuff kind of seems to have these confluences of coincidence all at the same time. And I can see how very easily you could think like, oh, this is the work of a higher power, like making all of this stuff come together.
Well, Camille, how about this? If it's already a secret society, how about we start a bagpipe religion?
Yeah. I love that. Who would be our Messiah?
You could be our first high priest. It would be maybe the first religion, at least in modern times, that's ever been started based around a female priesthood.
We actually, I've got a very good friend called Brad in Oklahoma, who's a piper.
Is this Beer Boy Brad?
Beer Boy Brad, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a very good mate of mine. And
I don't know him. I just listen to Chanter Rant, so I feel like I know him.
He's become a bit of a larger-than-life character with them.
Yeah.
He's the best person. I just love him. But he has this thing about basically that, like, religion has, like, like, God daddy and stuff like that. So, we need to have like a bagpipe daddy and like a bagpipe holy triumvirate of like daddy and like Jesus.
We can pick all kinds of great bagpiping saints and stuff like that too. So like,
we need to have like a tone daddy and like
a tone daddy. Someone who we can pray to for our burls specifically and for our doubling specifically.
It should definitely be a multi-deity faith. Like,
yeah, it's got to be.
There's way too many moving parts. It's such a complex instrument.
It's too much for just one benevolent being. Omniscient and benevolent, or maybe not benevolent, huh? Maybe we need the diversity. We need the opposition as well. So we definitely would need to have some sort of like tenor drumming devil character.
I love it. Or would that be the drum major? I don't know.
Oh, maybe it'd be the drum major. The judge.
Accountable. Yeah, the judge, exactly. Judging your dress. Well, there's already the flying spaghetti monster religion, right? So we can have like the, flying Scottish octopus.
There we go. I like that because then we could somehow tie it into Cthulhu, and I always get excited about anything Lovecraftian, so that would be great.
You got that great Cthulhu mask, don't you? That you
I do. So give me an excuse to bust it out again.
I love it.
All right. Well, Camille, I feel like the inevitable place that this conversation was going to go to was founding a religion. And amazing. So we've reached it. So good job.
I'll write the book.
Yeah, please do. Write our holy book. I'll be honest, Camille, I feel a little bit scared about some of the things that I said today, just because like I don't know much about like I don't want to offend folks, but also like genuinely, I don't know much about like the complicated histories of land grabbing and I mean, we talked about disabilities and all kinds of stuff. And so let me just say I'm sorry to everyone for my ignorance. It's only ignorance, I promise.
And I will say I don't apologize for anything that I said today, and anyone who has a problem, feel free to get in touch.
Yes, here we have a perfect distillation of the difference between American and Australian sensitivities, don't we?
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again. Now, would it bother you if I asked you how you feel about pineapple on pizza, Camille? That's kind of a thing I ask a lot of people about.
Not at all. It's funny actually because like pineapple is a huge thing here. On like we put it on burgers with beetroot and stuff like that. So,
I love that.
Like an Aussie sunrise burger is where you have like a steak with pineapple, beetroot, and a fried egg with lettuce and sauces and stuff.
That's a burger?
Yeah, it's called an Aussie sunrise. So you chuck that on so you have bread and stuff with it too, obviously.
Yeah, sure. But the burger is steak and
so
pineapple and beetroot.
Yeah, so steak burger with pineapple, beetroot, and a fried egg. Usually tomato sauce or barbecue sauce, depending on your preference, which you guys would call ketchup, I guess. And
come on.
I don't know. Do you have barbecue sauce?
Oh, we have barbecue sauce, absolutely.
Yeah, there you go.
Come on. Actually, one of the better barbecue places here in town is Australian themed, at least.
Is that Outback Steakhouse? Is that
not Outback Steakhouse? No, okay. I'm not that kitsch. Come on.
I've heard of that one. I'm actually disappointed that I never I've never been to an Outback Steakhouse in the US, but on my next trip over, I definitely.
Maybe it's really great. I don't know. I just kind of assumed that it's not, but maybe it's.
one of my friends from over there told me, they're like, oh, do you guys like, is that like, is the blooming onion like a really staple part of like what you guys eat? And I'm like, I've literally never heard of that in
That's what you have Christmas morning, right? You got to have a blooming onion.
I was just like, what the fuck is a blooming onion? I looked it up. I was like, oh, okay, no, this is not a thing. I mean, it sounds delicious.
Oh yeah, they're good. They're good, yeah.
But no, we definitely don't have that. But anyway, pineapple on pizza. So personally, I love pineapple juice. I love like just eating pineapple out of a can. I would never eat it on a pizza. Interesting. I don't know why.
What's your go-to pizza then?
Meat lovers usually.
Yeah.
Or some kind of like capriciosa, like chuck some olives on there with some meat. We're good. Oh, and lots of cheese, obviously.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a wood-fired pizza place near me that does an amazing potato pizza, and I'm like, anything where you can double down on carbs, I'm all about
yeah.
that. Like that's that. If you want to talk about heritage, that's the Irish coming out of me. Like I need all the potatoes all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So they chuck potato and pancetta with cheese on pizza.
That sounds really great. I've only ever had one pizza with potatoes on it, and interestingly, it also had pears on it.
Oh.
But it was really good. I really liked it.
Yeah, I've never tried pears on a pizza either. But yeah, usually pineapple pizzas here are from like